'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea. You won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. 'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea. You're listening to Jams and Tea.
And on the note of me never being a dom, welcome to the fourth episode of the Jams and Tea podcast.
Jake likes Rear Window too much to be a dom.
where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And we are here this week to not talk about music, apparently, and talk about our sexual proclivities.
I'll be right back.
And August is immediately leaving the podcast as soon as we record, which is, frankly, on brand.
BRB gonna go get dinner.
So I moved.
Oh God!
Oh Jesus! Oh, what a!
I just want to bring into this a poster of a film with completely non-controversial figures. Just.
The date we are recording this, by the way,
I know you are.
Is the 19th.
Yep.
And let me tell you, Twitter has been abuzz with Mr. Ansel Elgort
It's been
to
a
bring
day
some context
for
to
this
that.
boy.
I'm sorry, I just see Taron Egerton. What are you talking about?
No, I've ruined this. It's okay. We can.
Well, the podcast is completely ruined. So now, on that note, I would like to say that we are going to begin our introductions by saying what we have been listening to, other than the assigned 3 albums this week, and we should go in reverse order, just to spice things up a little bit. We're going to be talking today about what we have been listening to. Other than that, of course, then we are going to move directly into Run the Jewels 4 by Run the Jewels. Then we are going to Peaceful as Hell by Black Dresses. Then we are briefly going to be discussing the member of this podcast who released a piece of music semi-recently that we will roughly go over before transitioning to the recommended album this week, also courtesy of August, My Teenage Dream Ended by Farrah Abraham. And on the note of going in reverse, that means that, Saoirse, you are
No, it's
first.
Tyler.
Jams and Tea.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I am stupid. I said it with such confidence.
And that's what made it beautiful. I must say.
It also continues the
Yeah,
theme
it
of
was
me
so-
forgetting Tyler.
It was so confident that I just assumed you were right. And
Tyler Erasure.
no, I mustn't be last anymore. Something must have changed.
The Jets and that's the
Truly.
podcast now.
Destroys the pun that is on it completely.
Yeah.
Truly feeling appreciated. Okay, so
We love you.
I think last week I said I hadn't been listening to a lot of music, and I still haven't really been listening to a lot of music. I've been getting back into kind of movies a bit this week, but I mean that's neither here nor there. One thing I have done is I went back because we're discussing Black Dresses today. I went back and listened to all of their other records multiple times, as well as
I went back and listened to Waste Isolation.
yeah, nice.
Well, it's not your turn, is it?
I was just
No,
piling
that-
onto it.
That's
you
relevant.
fuck.
I was
relevant.
just going to save what Black Dresses I've been listening to this week for the segment on Black Dresses, but that's fine.
That's okay. I think interjecting other people to comment on what they've been listening to is fine. Like that's kind of the part
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
No, I just wanted to be a dill hole
whole.
because I'm,
You don't
because I'm
have to
very
try.
well. Yeah, that's true.
Because Morgan is the 4th most likable member of the podcast.
We've established this.
Right. Yeah. So I listened to those 3 records multiple times. Waste Isolation is really, really great. I want to shout out in particular their second album, Thank You, which I think is super underrated and kind of slept on. But all of their albums are really, really good. And I also want to shout out the album Love and Affection for Stupid Little Bitches, purely for its title alone, which is a fantastic title for a record.
And Jake has left.
Fuck the cops.
He is here.
Jesus Christ.
It's all right. Like I said, still recording. So you can enjoy me talking shit about you for the 30 seconds you were in here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, as I was saying, Black Dresses, listen to their stuff. I also listened, re-listened to. Please don't.
What's
do
wrong,
that.
Tyler? Are you You uncomfortable?
I'm just going to cover your face up on my screen. I also have been listening to the work of Phoebe Bridgers in the last few days in anticipation for her new record, which came out on Friday, if it's not Friday where you are, which it won't be when you're listening to this, so on Friday. So I revisited Stranger in the Alps, and I also listened to Better Oblivion Community Centre's self-titled record, the collaboration she did with Kona Oberst, and I really enjoyed that. Kona Oberst.
I wasn't going to say anything for once.
Just let him go.
Well, the thing is, I knew people at school who were called Connor, and it was always spelled with the double N. So Kona Oberst. So when I discovered Bright Eyes, it was the first time I ever heard of someone called that with only one N. So I just assumed that it was a different name that was meant to be pronounced differently. I've always pronounced it as Kona.
My favorite late night talk show, Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien.
I thought that Kona was what happened like when you were attracted to Conan O'Brien. Anyway.
Tyler.
Anyway.
Do we need to run a workshop for the podcast?
Aggressively, anyways. So I listened to Stranger in the Alps, obviously a great record, and Better Oblivion Community Centre is a decent record that I don't like quite as much, but has some good songs. And then I listened just last night to Punisher, which I won't talk about at all. If you follow me on Twitter, you already know what I think about that record, but I'm very excited to be discussing it next week. Other than that, I went back and listened to the discography of The Verve, who Jake and I recently discussed, and our discussion of their discography will be online eventually. So they're a great band, and definitely check that out when it comes up, because we had a really fun and interesting discussion, I think. Yeah. And in terms of first listens, that's really it. I think I will let someone else have the floor now.
I think that's me.
Saoirse.
So in the week, I moved out my old uni apartment because my rent's up, my degree's over. They're not sure if I got a 2-1 or a first. I love to live my life. But as I was unloading the moving van, I put on, in the vein of being predictable, Take That Heart by Frank Turner.
Good album.
Yeah, one of the best ever, I think. But I can tell you right now, the song Polaroid Picture hits real different when you're moving out,
Ooh.
Yeah, when you're moving out of uni, when uni's finished. Let go of the little distractions, hold close to the ones that you love. So we won't all be here this time next year, so while you can, take a picture of us. Anyway, I love that album. I listened to I Can Hear the Heart Beating as One by Yoda Tenga, which is an album I love.
Tyler's just like, yes.
Well, it's
a really good
top
album.
10 all time for me, so I have to
It's really, really good. I listened to, let me see if I can get this name right. Trust in the Life Force of the Deep Mystery.
Ooh,
The Comet is Coming.
Yeah.
By The Comet is Coming, which was just not like anything else I'd really heard before, and I loved it.
So fun.
It's
Great album.
Record.
It's like ambient electro jazz. I love it to pieces. Yep. I listened to the new Idols single. What do we think of the new Idols single?
Good. Very, very,
Very
good.
good, yeah.
Listen to it.
I haven't heard it yet.
Hyped.
Also, because I listened to your episode on the Mars Volta.
Yeah, boy!
I listened to Francis the Mute.
So how was 80 minutes without Frank Turner? I was saving that.
Oh,
That was good, and I'm glad you waited until now.
I can't lie. I am loving the animosity on this episode. We're just going for the throat.
It's like a solid 8. I love it to pieces.
Oh wow. Okay.
Tyler just instantly like.
No, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. I cannot lie.
I feel like the more I listen to it, the more I get familiar with it, and its lyrics and story, especially, that rating will go up. But it's definitely one I want to re-listen to. I feel like it's everything I get out of my mum's prog rock records, but for me now. So I will definitely go back to it.
I mean, how hard does Elvia Kez go? I mean, holy shit.
So
Honest.
tango.
It is at times face melting, which is what I want. I mean, like, yeah, like I do talk about, like, I love folk music and sort of folk punk and yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, what I really love is like music that does challenge me and sort of make me think about music in a new way. Like the reason I love
Francis, do that.
That kind of music that I like so much, because first time I heard not what most people think to be folk punk, it's not like the front bottoms, but like the first time I heard like a Pat the Bunny record, it's just like, this is a music that people listen to, and it's for me and just me. So I like music that kind of does that. And Francis, you do that. And yeah, I went to listen to Love and Affection for Stupid Little Bitches by Black Dresses. And I will come back to what I think of that later.
Oh, is
That
it
means-
me? It's me?
Yeah, it's Momo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of things, I've been going back and listening to Run the Jewels a lot.
Run them jewels fast.
Because I'd only heard the first one before hearing the fourth one, never the second or third one, and I still haven't heard the second or third one in full yet. But because I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. I've been listening to Thank You Scientists some.
Good band.
Enjoy them a lot. Phoebe Bridgers, of course, but we'll get into that next week. As usual, Go Farther in Likeness by Gang of Youths is in rotation quite a bit, but like for the past 2 years, that's been my life. So,
Yep.
I was gonna suggest that if you don't recommend that record for a future episode's discussion, I will. Because that would be quite a cool one.
Saoirse, you in particular would really like
because
that
there's
record.
just so much
I've got a pen, I can
variation
write it
on
down.
that album.
What's
And
it called again?
August likes the Springsteens, so I mean, I think he would.
The record is Go Farther in Lightness.
By
Is it
Gang
go
of Youths.
farther or go further?
Farther.
With an R.
You know what?
Okay.
I think I'll just replace the Refused spot with that.
Ooh, I love both of those records, so I don't.
Yeah.
I am
I mean,
okay.
I have no feelings because I love them both about the same.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, and I'll just put the Refused record for later. Anyway, that's about all I've been listening to.
All right,
All
that
right.
goes to
Me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so so first off, I'm going to cover the things I had short things to say about, and then we'll get into the big one.
Oh yes, this has been a saga. I'm so
in
excited.
the spirit of Run the Jewels, I decided to listen to a rap rock album from 1992. Very famous. You know who it is. That's right, it's Body Count.
I didn't know who it was. I just
This is, okay,
I mean,
so...
I truly had no idea who
I
that
was just
was.
I was
still
just
don't.
already laughing at the thought that Run the Jewels would make you want to listen to rap rock of all things.
Well, Zach de la Rocha's on it, so that's
Right,
why.
yeah. Fair enough.
But anyways, this is a Body Count, their self-titled record. It's a record, it's kind of, if you don't understand why Ice-T is such an important figure in rap and music in general, you seriously got to listen to this because there's some really great kind of political stuff on here. Excuse that Phantom Menace-esque transition. Anyways, this
I
thing,
hate it here.
it's got there's a couple like short skits that aren't too annoying, but overall this is like 50 minutes long, really good. Peep it out. Stop, cat. The other thing I've been listening to, and I can actually grab this too, because that's also an equally fun thing,
He just leaves. He just doesn't come back.
is This, which is a chronology record of like the best songs by British band The Kinks. And
yes.
this is a band who I think is vastly underrated, and if you want to get into this band, you got to check out like I know Tyler's listening to it.
This might just be me being British, but are the Kinks underrated?
In America, they're really underappreciated.
Yeah, it's true. Yes. He's correct.
I'm and like seriously, you got to listen to like. Anyways, sorry. You got to listen to like Arthur, Lola versus Powerman, all that good stuff from like the 60s to early 70s, and now for the big one. Because on our Mars Volta podcast, I got so lampooned for my particular, I guess, mild distaste towards the new Jason Isbell record. Jake suggested I listen to Sam Hunt's Southside. And I listened.
New album, 2020 release.
2020 release. I listened to it.
The release, all right.
This was a saga, truly. Witnessing August plow through this album was it was a journey.
Now, here's how I'm going to describe this album.
Just very quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
Very quickly, I want to say I thought you were about to say that you listened to Southeastern by Jason Isbell, and I'm so glad you didn't, because I don't think I could have handled it.
Anyways, Southside. This album is like if someone listened to Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA and thought to themselves, wow, that was the most racist, sexist, jingoistic album I've ever heard. I want to make exactly that. That's what this album is.
Here's the question, August. Does it have big himbo energy?
It has huge himbo energy. Like, I said that as a joke about Isbell. This is like, this guy's dong is swinging like back-to-back pendulum style himbo. That's this man. Like, there's a song.
Look at me, Big Genghis.
And there's a song on here. It's just a barrage of like sexism and terrible ideas, like Body Like a Back Road, where he like creeps on a girl because she's really curvy and stalks her for like a month or something until he gets her number. And then he talks about having slow sex with her, and it's the worst song of all time.
Like, I don't understand what is supposed to be. I'm not the first person to say this, I know, but I don't understand what's supposed to be complimentary about saying you have a body like a back road.
Look,
like, what is
Morgan and I
what's the
live in
implication here? I want to
Kentucky.
drive over you.
We have driven on several back roads. There is nothing sexy about them.
And
nothing.
The song that's even more egregious. That's like you got that Springsteen song on Born in the USA, Hometown, which is this song about institutionalized racism in America. And it sounds like Sam Hunt heard that and he made a song. He was like, yeah, hometowns is mighty cool. I'm going to show my hometown to my girl. It sounds exactly like that. It's just aggressively Americana cancer.
See, what's interesting to me about this record, I haven't heard it. What's interesting to me about it?
You'd like it.
Look, let me finish the fucking sentence before you judge. I'm not making an evaluation of a record I haven't heard. I'm just commenting on the cultural reaction to it. So it's interesting to me, from what you've described of this record, that the record still seems to be somewhat beloved in certain critical circles, or like at least it's getting praised. So I find that interesting, because it normally seems like the kind of thing that critics would be falling over themselves to dunk on.
No,
so
it's weird.
I'm really intrigued by that dissonance.
I mean, there's a lot of people who just don't have fucking taste.
Yeah, I know for sure.
A lot of them work for
Pitchfork. One more comment about this record,
please.
So, you know the first American football album.
Yes,
I'm aware of it. Yeah.
The way that album was composed was a lot of the songs were written with non-standard tuning in mind. the way Sam Hunt sings on this album is like if he's singing for a non-standardly tuned guitar. It's horrid. It's so bad.
What about August? What about my favorite song on the album, Breaking Up Was Easier in the 90s?
Oh my god! Why did you have to remind me of that song? It's just the worst chorus. Breaking Up Was Easier in the 90s.
He's not kidding. That's what it fucking sounds like.
That's what he says.
I have laughed myself into a headache.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to listen to this album at some point, and I'll report back on my feelings next week.
I am doing no such thing.
Don't, Morgan.
Don't.
As the biggest fan of Americana here, it will literally kill you.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I'm most curious to know what Morgan would think of it because he's such a big fan of Americana.
Well, I mean, he'd say it's bad.
I mean, I don't think I could add anything more than to what August just said. So
Fair enough.
So yeah, that's Sam Cunt's South
That was
Side.
easy. Come on.
No, that was.
I'm so glad that I brought that to your attention. Just
Fuck
for the sake of perspective, really.
I mean, look, Isbell, I have all the respect in the world for as an artist. I just don't personally care for his output. Sam Hunt, on the other hand. Jake, what did you listen to this week?
I've actually, since I've gone back to work, which if any episode of this podcast is late, I apologize for, because I have to work an obscene amount of hours now because not all of the employees are back yet at where I work, and I have to do a lot of work. That being said, I have gotten the opportunity to listen to a whole lot of music, and I keep all of it recorded now onto a huge Excel sheet of bullshit. So I was listening to, I'm going and compiling a list of my favorite albums of all time. So I'm going back and revisiting a lot of classic albums in my personal canon, one of which being Thrice's The Alchemy Index, which, yes, Morgan, thank you. Get me right
football.
That's it.
Anyway.
That's the one. Thrice, if you don't know, are a post-hardcore alternative rock band that have a very, very interesting career album-wise, and really like only one or two duds in their discography, honestly. And the Alchemy Index is a compilation of 4 different EPs that they had that are all concept albums around the 4 elements: earth, fire, wind, and water.
They did some good disco albums, Sam.
That's why I listen to it, of course.
Yeah.
But all of them are very distinct. They all have a very complete sonic identity. I would highly recommend them just if you're trying to get into that band in general. Great place to start. All of the EPs are fantastic. It's one of my favorite albums in general. I also listened to, of course, I listened to the 3 albums we're going to talk about this week. I listened to The Verve, as Tyler and I will have discussed on our B-Sides episode. I've listened to, at the recommendation of Tyler, I think on this podcast, at least on a discussion we had maybe after filming it, the band Mew.
Oh, yeah.
And Mew have 2 albums that I listened to, No More Stories and Frangers. And both of them are great. I love them a lot. They are basically, as I described to Morgan in the chat a couple days ago, I described them as a dream pop version of the band Yellow Card. And they're great. The songwriting's fantastic. The sonic variety on the albums is wonderful. It's very enveloping. I am very eager to get to their entire discography personally. I've also been getting into the band Manic Street Preachers, mostly because of Morgan's getting into them earlier this year.
They're a really good band. Well done.
They are. And I listened to 3 of their albums, specifically Everything Must Go, Futurology, and Holy Bible. Everything Must Go is my favorite of theirs so far.
What are 3 albums to choose? So you couldn't do better.
Just a great fucking album, like just a really amazing, like punk, alt rock, post punk. Like, it's so hard to describe their specific sound. It's very like, also just a lot of like classic rock influence. They are very good. Oh wait, I also listened to my bad, I did forget to include their album
Generation Terrorist.
First one, Generation Terrorist, which I also love a lot. That album's like a lot more classic rocky than their other stuff.
Yeah.
But I liked all of them. And I also listened to Holy Bible, which is an album I really like and I will never listen to again because that album's fucking heavy, man. Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, the lyrics on that album are some heavy shit. You read that as you listen to it, and you're just like,
makes 9 Inch Nails the Downward Spiral look like fucking Sgt. Pepper's or some shit.
There's a specific lyric on that album that I can't even repeat because it's like the most like, haunting lyric I've ever heard.
It's a very sparse album, but it's very much suits the content. And Futurology I listened to, which is one of their more recent records, which I think is really, really good, really anthemic. Not quite as good as their other ones, but considering they're like the ones I listen to are like their most beloved, that's not exactly like a teardown of them. I also listened to I've listened to Everything's Get to Heaven again.
What do you know?
I know, right? Like, who expected it?
Jake listening to Everything's Get to Heaven?
I also listened to Carly Rae Jepsen's Dedicated Side B, which came out, which is it's good. Good release from Carly again. Can't really complain.
Hey guys, Dedicated is actually the best Carly Rae Jepsen album.
Charlie Ray Jepsen.
Charlie Ray Jepsen.
I like how August's impersonation of Tyler is just like a caricature of just.
Oh, that's what he was doing. I couldn't.
Yeah, he was like.
Yeah, that was you.
Carly Rae Jepsen's best album is Dedicated.
No. That's just like a gay character in an 80s teen movie.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I think that, and I think what it was is just the entirety of Rate Your Music. All at
that
once.
As well.
Speaking in unison.
Well, the thing is, like, they don't really like Dedicated that much. Like, I seem to be the only one.
Would you say you're not dedicated to it?
No,
well, I am. That's the thing. I love that record, but other people seem to not love it as much.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay.
Morgan's left.
I like Dedicated. It's just not emotion. And sorry, I'm basic. I'm sorry. But I also listened to, let's see. Oh, I listened to Devin Townsend's Ocean Machine.
Of course you did.
His best album.
Fucking surprise.
And also, I think that was such disdain. God damn,
what a
man.
Surprise.
What the fuck?
Oh,
but, that currently is at the absolute top of my list for favorite albums of all time right now.
Really?
So... unexpected, but I came at that album and just really appreciated it again. Oh, Jesus, Morgan. What did I do?
I've just never seen Tyler be that animated. He just looked at the camera like...
Looking like Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks.
I was about to quote Uncle Ruckus, and I decided against it. It's bad. It's a bad move.
Probably. I listened to that, and I loved it. Of course, that's currently front runner for like my favorite album in the whole world. I listened to Arca's new album, Kick Eye, which is great. Listen to that. An essential 2020 listen. Good album. I listened to a dark kind of ambient jazz album called We Are Sent Here by History by Shabaka and the Ancestors. Good shit. If you like jazz, highly recommend it.
You like jazz?
You like jazz?
I stand corrected. My role on this podcast is not big Labrador energy, but it is just to reference bad movies all the time.
That is also true. I listened, and Saoirse, in spirit of that, I listened to, not bad movies, but an album you listened to last week, which is Nonagon Infinity by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Yes.
Because I fucking love that album. And surprise, surprise, it still fucking owns. It's great.
I listened to Professor Rat's Nest again this week.
Hell yeah, that album's also one of their
slaps
best.
so fucking hard.
I re-listened to Perfume Genius' Set My Heart on Fire. Still love that album to death.
Sorry.
I listened to one of my favorite underrated hip-hop releases of the past decade, which is Aesop Rock's The Impossible Kid. Please listen to that album.
That's a
It's
good
so
album.
fucking good.
Is Aesop Rock like the Kid Rock of rap?
Yeah.
I hate that
Yeah.
so much.
It-
By
it's
the
No.
way, he's my cat.
No, he's not.
Oh yes, cats meet each other. The joining of the cats.
Cats. Andrew Lloyd Webber jokes.
Look,
Get
I
here.
was gonna make him.
I listened to, I'm trying to get through this quickly. I listened to Every Time I Die's Low Teens, just because I haven't listened to that in a while and I wanted to go back to it.
The best
Is
metalcore
that the
record.
percentage rating you'd give it?
No, it's one of the best metalcore albums I've ever listened to. I love it.
It was the best metalcore release of last decade.
It's fan-fucking-tastic, and if you are even remotely a metalcore or even like a punk-inclined person, give that a listen.
You said that just because I don't really listen to metalcore, but I do listen to punk. That's exactly.
Yeah, well,
why
I mean,
you
that's
said
also
that.
why you're going to listen to Lamb of God, because that's going to happen.
I just want
which-
to say the first time I ever heard of Lamb of God was it was on the Kermode and Mayo podcast.
Oh,
and
stop.
Mark
Not you.
Kermode
Okay.
had just started ranting about how in metal music you can't hear what they say anymore, and then someone sent in an email trying to talk about metal and like the difference between like sludge metal and groove metal, and they sent in a clip of Lamb of God.
For which one?
I
Sludge
can't
or groove
remember.
metal?
I can't remember.
Surely.
It would have to be groove metal because
Yeah.
they are not sludge metal,
Yeah.
which is still a weird comparison. That being said, I listened to the self-titled new Lamb of God, and I will keep my thoughts
Which
to
we are
myself
going
on
to
that.
talk about.
Yes, because we are going to cover it. But spoiler
In a
alert, just listen to that. It's good. I won't elaborate. But I also like Tyler, I went back and listened to Phoebe Bridgers' Stranger in the Alps, which is one of my favorite singer-songwriter records of the past decade, to prepare for Punisher, which I also listened to. And like Tyler, I will keep my mouth real fucking shut about that album because I have a lot to say about it and I am nowhere near done listening to it.
The
but I did
second
that.
high-quality album Phoebe Bridgers has been on this year.
Yeah, that's true. If you like bad music, and that's pretty much it. That's all I've been listening to.
I don't know who that was a shot at, but I'll just say it was that Saoirse.
Well, now that Tyler has transmogrified into a cat and left the
That was a
podcast,
Calvin and Hobbes
We are
joke. I
going-
can respect that. I can respect that. Hi.
thank you. We are going to go and talk about Run the Jewels' new release, Run the Jewels, which is an album by Killer Mike and LP. Their fourth album, as you may have inferred by that title.
You didn't even say the number.
No, you didn't.
You didn't. You did not.
You said Run the Jewels.
New album, Run the
Well, he
Jewels.
mentioned it before.
I mean,
God.
I hate to be
Run the
that.
Jewels
I hate to
four.
be that guy, but
It's
it's
not even-
actually called RTJ.
Exactly. It's not
What do you
even
mean you
Run the
hate to
Jewels.
be that guy? You are that fucking
No,
guy.
I don't hate it. I love it. Okay.
This really is the pain you can trust.
I hate all of you.
I'm glad, Morgan. But yeah,
I
they
love
came
you.
out with their fourth album, which was highly anticipated. This has been in the works for what, like 4 years now?
Yeah, the RTJ3 was 2016.
And Run the Jewels, of course, being a very beloved hip-hop duo of Killer Mike and LP. And honestly, in my opinion at least, which I guess for those familiar with their work, I'll just say this and expect it to be somewhat echoed, is that they are a quality hip-hop duo who have produced pretty much nothing short of good material. They are consistently very good. And I think Run the Jewels 4 follows in that tradition of being a quality fucking hip-hop release from Run the Jewels. And first, to talk about it in depth, I personally would like to hear from none other than Morgan Diatley, noted fan of hip-hop on this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, my friends, we are living in hell. We're living in
Yes.
hell. I can't say it in any more concise terms than that. And as such, I personally feel that Run the Jewels have delivered the soundtrack to hell. Not in the sense that it's terrible to listen to or you have a bad time. In fact, the exact opposite. They have so concisely and perfectly captured the time that we are living in right now with such passion and anger and animosity, but never fear, which is, I think, the most important part of this record. It's, for me, protest music is like the most important aspect of it is to acknowledge the truth of the situation, but to never be afraid. Like, be skeptical, be, analytical, but you can never be afraid if you want to rally the people around something.
Here.
If anyone understands that, it is Killer Mike and LP, because this is a record that is absolutely on fire. Like, from moment to moment, it is just so impassioned and perfectly realized, and like the beats on this album sound like they were dropped in a fryer and just roasted to perfection. They're fantastic. Like, I don't even know how to speak about them without being completely hyperbolic, but here we are. Anyway.
Do it.
I mean, I just feel like I can't undersell this album at all.
Sure.
Because it just, whew. Okay. It's never an album that's afraid, but it is an album that is not afraid to be in pain publicly. It's a very transparent record about the state of affairs and how Black people are treated in America and across the world, really. Like, the song that leaps to mind immediately is Pulling the Pin, featuring Mavis Staples and Josh Homme.
Yes.
Excellent
Such an important song.
My God, it's the line, "There's a grenade in my heart and the pin is in their palm." Like, writers have been sitting around for thousands of years trying to think of a line that good. Right. And then they just did it.
Yeah.
They just did it. And then they got Mavis fucking Staples to sing the song.
And in a way, like, the thing that feels so great about Run the Jewels is, like, they will spit the best lines you've heard in decades, but the way LP and Killer Mike, their specific flows make it sound like they're thinking of it on the spot. And even though they probably sat around and spent weeks writing it, it feels like they just came up with it.
I mean, that feels like a whole lot of the record. It just feels like the most controlled chaos ever assembled. And I kind of wish I had prepared my thoughts a little more coherently than this, because I feel like right now it's just stream of consciousness and overhype. But like, it's so empathetic, and it understands the state of the world right now to a degree that, like, I feel like it's easy to compare it to Rage Against the Machine, like Evil Empire in the first record. But I feel like not even they understood the situation that they were in as well as Run the Jewels have. But maybe that's just me. But in spite of all that heavy stuff that's on the album, it's just almost really consistently fun as well. Yeah. Like, it's never going to weigh down on you with, like, oh, the pain. It's immensely listenable. And I've listened to it upwards of 10 times since I heard it like 3 days ago. I just keep coming back to it. And it's really the first thing in the past 6 months that has given me some kind of resolve.
Wow.
Plenty of things have given me resolve, but it's the first thing that's given me resolve without fear or hesitation. It is a rallying cry for justice, and it could not have been put together any better than by Killer Mike and LP.
Yeah.
I think that is a wonderful way of putting it personally.
Ow.
Did anybody else hear that? Okay.
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay. That being said, I would like to piggyback off of what Morgan said and say that I think that there are several decisions in regards to this record that are basically laser focused on designing this to be one of their most poignant and sharp and impactful releases. Mainly, first of which being it is their shortest album since Run the Jewels 1 at a scant 39 minutes, which is still managing to feel quite robust. Like, you know, there's 11 tracks here, and I don't think a single one of them, bar maybe one exception, feels underdeveloped. That being said, I completely agree with Morgan. LP's production on this, I think, is his most impressive work yet. I think not only would I say that this is my favorite release from Run the Jewels, I think this is his best work in general since Run the Jewels 2. And the beats on here, it's not even that they are like fiery, which they are, it's that they are fucking huge. So many albums here, so many songs here just come and sucker punch you. There are songs like Holy Calamafuck, which just sound monolithic. And they have like the sampling, the cries of that kid, you know, screaming, "More fire!" And it's the loudest shit. And it's so catchy. And that's another thing about this album is that it, like, I think that the fact that it is so bouncy and so fun and so immensely listenable adds to its appeal in a sense that, like, there are, like, albums this poignant do run the risk of being ones that you can, like, that will bog you down a little bit. But I also think that an album that this never before has the term, the last Idols album was called Joy as an Act of Resistance.
I was going to say
that. And this album is that. It is joy as an act of resistance. It is Killer Mike and LP. It is them being braggadocious. It is them being on fire. It is them being as on point as they've ever been. And they are doing it with a renewed sense of purpose that feels really, really strong, especially, most notably, on the song Walking in the Snow, which utilizes which Killer Mike invokes a line, the notorious "I can't breathe." Keep in mind the song was recorded like 3 years ago. This was not something that was made for this right now.
I think it was recorded last year, or it might have been recorded earlier, because it's specifically about Eric Garner.
Yeah, it's about Eric Garner, and just the entirety of Walking in the Snow is such a harrowing fucking listen. You just hear it and you feel all of the thematic poignancy of this album. And there's also just parts like Just, which features Pharrell Williams and Zach De La Rocha. And when Zach comes in with that fucking refrain of "Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar," you're just like, it's like I'm listening
a punch in the face, right?
Yeah, it's like you're listening to a Rage Against the Machine song.
Yeah,
and it's great. Or when people unexpected, like Josh fucking Homme, pop up on this album, and they sample his eerie vocals and guitars on The Ground Below, and Pulling the Pin. It's fucking eerie, but it works because it just goes so hard. And I will say, just the last thing I have to say notable about this album is that I think the Run the Jewels, I think the centerpiece of the album and the absolute best song they have ever made is A Few Words for the Firing Squad, which is the closing track. Absolutely. A huge 6-minute long just like expression of their pure pain and discontent in the world, and it builds slowly. Like the beat just becomes larger and larger and larger until this crescendo at the end, and it is absolutely fucking flawless. You have LP talking about how his sister has dealt with assault, talking about Killer Mike, who's just talking about everything happening, like racially speaking, going on in America, and their very personal experience. And you do feel like they are being like, this is the end of like Paths of Glory, and they are being marched up to be shot. And this is their last stage.
And then the way the song ends is a wonderful subversion of that, I would just say. When the moment transitions into a John Carpenter score is the moment I just want to leap on some things he said, if that's right, and say some things to myself. I completely agree. This album is really fun. That's the thing I always like about Run the Jewels is like they are braggadocious and loud, but they are never dour. Even when their songs are bleak, like their lead single "Ooh La La" has one of the most melancholy piano leads, and it's like off the beat, it's off the rhythm, it's out to wrong foot you. It's been a long time since I've heard a single with that kind of emotional complexity and rhythmical complexity. I fucking hate the sample, but that's outside of it. It's the most grating thing I've ever heard. It was just not that I've ever heard. I listened to Farrah Abraham this week. But no.
Wow.
Just talking about Walking in the Snow very quickly. Yeah, you talked about the I Can't Breathe line in that, but the line that really complements that beautifully for me is the line, never forget that in the story of Jesus, the hero was killed by the state.
Fucking amazing line.
Absolutely.
Great line.
There's another line that I think unlocks the whole album as an idea, which is in the song Just, when LP compares Kurt Vonnegut to Ayn Rand.
Yes, I was gonna bring that line up, so I'm so pleased that you did.
Thank you, because I just before, literally a month ago, I finished reading a Kurt Vonnegut book, one of his few non-sci-fi books called God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater. I don't know if any of you know it, but it's a book about this guy who's in charge of his family's heirloom foundation, and he gets to spend it however he wants. And he used to go to this really impoverished town that was sort of ruined by the economy of the business his father wrought. And he just sets up an office there, and anyone can go in and ask for any help for anything, and he will spend the money to help them. And it's about his father's company's lawyers trying to prove he's insane for doing this. And it's basically a book with the message, we should love people who aren't productive in society, and just we should love people whatever. That's the message of the book. And I love that. And comparing it to Ayn Rand with her hateful screeds of novels. And I just want to bring up the fact that, because LP has referenced this line in his Twitter, like someone sent a tweet saying that this line is about empathy over selfishness, and LP endorsed this message. He said, I'm glad someone got what I was trying to say. And I think that completely unlocks the album. It is joyous and active persistence. It is, yes, it's bleak and shit. And we're also acknowledging that in the tone of the music. This is a more downbeat album than RTJ3.
Yes.
But it's still, these guys are natural entertainers, and I feel like they wouldn't be physically able to release an album without trying to entertain you at the very least. The final track is amazing. And yeah, just those are the specifics I have. I feel like a lot of what I have to say has already been touched on. So I want to say the other tracks are really good. My thoughts on the album aren't necessarily improved by touching on those tracks individually, even though they are. I would just say that, like, the whole album is filled with tracks that are at bare minimum like a soft 7.
Yep.
And at the maximum like a hard 10, you know.
That is a wonderful way of putting that. I think it's a very balanced and very well distributed album. It's just an album that knows when to pull its punches and whatnot. And not to mention just all the stuff we've talking about. And on a note of the more like joy is an act of resistance, this album has some quality fucking bangers. Out of Sight might be my favorite straight banger they've ever released. I put that on and I just want to fucking dance.
This is an album that made me like 2 Chainz. Like,
I was about to say, they made 2 Chainz good.
They really did.
He's still the worst part of that song, but he's pretty good.
Stupid hot dog line in there.
Yeah.
And it's like I can forgive that because the rest of the song is good.
Yeah.
What is that line? I've got hot dog stands like I've got women or something.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Sure.
August, I want to hear your thoughts on the record.
Oh, you do? Oh, no.
Yeah, I do. Before I go.
No, I quite enjoy this record, and this is a point I was kind of shocked no one else has brought up yet, but I think everyone would agree with, is that Run the Jewels is very much a band if you like, or I guess group, rather. If you like one album they've done, you're going to like everything they've done.
100% agree with this.
And what I find so so kind of stand out about this album above a bit of their other albums in their catalog would be the instrumental presence, particularly the like bass lines on this album, which are just blown out, but not in a way where it reads as incompetent, but in a way where it reads as the exact opposite, complete confidence in the listener to understand that that is a creative decision made and not one made out of not understanding music production. Because LP is really just this fantastic force of the group who is able to elevate their already amazing rapping and just elevate it with this very ballsy production is how I would describe it. I mean, you guys have already covered like pretty much all of the best tracks, so I can't really throw in.
That is a problem on this podcast, I find.
No, yeah. I mean, I guess, and this is going to be a very August thing to like, I really enjoy how this album is set up to kind of circle around into itself.
Yeah.
And what's so good about that is
almost like
because
your one
it completely fits with the narrative this record is going for, that this is a systematic problem, and the album looping back into itself
Yes.
implies that this problem will just keep going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really beautiful decision, I think.
Yeah.
If I had any issues, I find that this album, enjoyment-wise for me, is a bit inconsistent towards not really because I think the front of this album is great, middle of this album, the like very, very middle of this album is great, and the end of this album is great, but those two kind of bits in the between the beginning and middle and the middle
The
and
transitions into
yes,
the
the
sections.
transitions are, for me, probably are just kind of weak. And it really sucks that I think that, because for me it really detracts from this album's consistency, because it just makes me go, oh, this part's great. Oh, awesome. Oh, yeah, it ended strong. But overall, I mean, what else can I say? Everything's been said. It's fantastic.
Can I piggyback off of that and guess that you're one of the tracks that that transitions into the middle that you dislike is Goonies versus E.T.?
That would be one of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's my least favorite song on the record.
That song it's just really kind of half-baked, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
mean, I get the point they're trying to make. It makes perfect sense, but they could have just built on it in a way that would be much more compelling.
I wanted more hit to it. I wanted
Yes.
a chorus that had a bit more bite.
I mean, like, Mike's last verse is really good.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
Mike's last verse a lot.
Counterpoint. No.
Morgan, please debate me.
I actually have to go get
It's like your
dinner.
facts, not your feelings.
Pussy.
I will say, I will agree that Goonies versus E.T. is in the bottom tier of the album, but I still like it a lot.
No, I like it. It's a good song.
Like it? It's okay.
It's a
I'm going
good
to go
song.
get dinner now and let Tyler talk.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I hope that not everything's been said, August, because I have a few things to say about pretty much every song on this record, and I'll try and keep them. I'll try
Ooh la
and keep,
la.
I'll try and
Ah,
keep
oui,
them
oui.
sounding coherent. First thing I want to do is I want to kick off with a quote from LP during the interview cycle for this record, and I think that and I'll get into the relevance of this quote shortly. But basically, what he said is, two dudes who were born in 1975 are not supposed to be allowed to be at the cutting edge of music. We're not supposed to be allowed to be at the table. It's supposed to be that all of our influences and all of the things that we came up with and love are supposed to have been replaced by a new group of influences that people are rightfully into because they're younger and they didn't experience the moments that we did. But those moments that we had are something that if you grasp onto them, there's a vibe that originated in the golden era of rap music. If you do it, not with imitation and not with recreation, but with the spirit, with the essence of it, if you can successfully infuse that into your music, then you'll make people happy and you'll make yourself happy. And I think that's
beautiful.
when Run the Jewels is at its best.
I love
Beautiful.
that.
And I completely
that's
agree
a
with
Picasso quote. there's a Picasso quote that when critics get together, they talk about form and theme and meaning. When artists get together, they talk about where you can buy cheap turpentine. And I think that quote from LP is like the epitome of that. Like, he is talking about being an artist.
Yeah, and I think that idea of being first and foremost focused on making good music through capturing the spirit of the music that influenced them rather than trying to imitate it really encapsulates why their sound and why their style works so well and is so beloved. They are very much capturing the energy of that golden era of rap music, but they're infusing it with distinctly modern, distinctly 2010s, now 2020 ideas and feelings and themes and expressions of those feelings. So that's why their music and the fact that they keep up to date is why their music always feels fresh each album they put out, even though they don't really vary themselves stylistically that much on their records. This record, I think, I agree with some people have already said that it's one of its greatest strengths is that for all of its political fire and the rage against the machine, for lack of a better word, that's infused into this record, no pun intended. There is a real sense of fun here, and Saoirse, you said that they're pure entertainers, which is spot on. Exactly what they are. They know how to please a crowd. They know how to entertain. They know how to make you laugh. They know how to make you cry. They know how to infuse their music with sentimentality and pathos and just pretty much everything that you could want from art, really, in terms of the emotional experience. And that's all over this record. That's what makes this record so particularly impactful at this point in their career, despite the fact that it's not really much of a sonic progression, I don't think. LP as a producer is basically as good as he's ever been. I don't quite love the beats as much as I love the beats on RTJ2, which is still my favorite Run the Jewels record. But I will say that I think more than ever, there is a real crispness, a real kind of, for lack of a better word, expensive sound to the production here. Like, it just really sounds like the work of a seasoned veteran who knows what he's doing and is not like making beats to impress, is just genuinely trying to make the best sounding expression of the feelings of a track and the best sounding bed for him and Killer Mike to express themselves over. And it's really consistent here. In terms of performances, the rapping on this record is, having listened to most of the work that both LP and Killer Mike have done, both as Run the Jewels and solo. I haven't listened to everything, but I've listened to much of it. I can say fairly confidently that I think that both of them are rapping as well as they ever have, if not better than they ever have. The performances here are uniformly excellent. The flows, the rhyme schemes, every possible technical element of the rapping that you could analyze here, I think, is pretty much fantastic. And I mean, it's a credit to them that that is the case on most of their records, I think, as Run the Jewels. But it's just especially clear here that, like someone already said, that it feels like, I think it was Saoirse or someone said that it feels like there is an almost improv quality to the performances here. Like, it feels like they're very off the cuff, but like, having read about the way that they write music together and the way they kind of finish each other's bars and they kind of work together very collaboratively in writing, and they just spend a lot of time on it, and they like go through drafts of stuff. Like, it's a real credit that to them, that their sound, their delivery has that quality, that improvisational feel, despite the fact that it is clearly, when you read the lyricism, it's very clear that a lot of work has gone into it, because it's incredibly detailed. There's lots of double meanings and just to pick out a random line, like specifically the line that Saoirse's already talked about, the LP line on Just Money, got a Vonnegut punch for your Atlas shrug. Like, Saoirse, you talked better than I ever could about the literary significance of that line, but just also to jump on top of that and appreciate the wordplay in that line as well. Vonnegut punch Atlas shrug. Like there's layers of wordplay there on top of the actual substantive meaning of the line that are just mind-boggling. Like the more I listen to this record, the more I pick up on those kinds of details, on those kinds of that kind of nuance in the lyricism here. And it's super, it just super speaks to what fantastic craftsmen these two guys are lyrically, how much love and care and effort and time and patience they have for their art is really reflected in every single line here. There's no weak performances, there's no weak verses at all. So I will just spend time highlighting the things that are especially great. I love the twisted, contorted sample on Out of Sight. It's one of my favorite beats on the whole record. It sounds really great. I love how it's super compelling, but also a minimal backdrop for the track. Really, it's quite a minimal song if you actually take the elements of it apart. But it feels huge, despite the fact that there are such a small number of elements on the track. I want to highlight, especially the Killer Mike's flow on this track in particular is just bananas. It's so good. It's just his flow on the song is just, it makes me want to cry. Like it's that impressive. And this is the thing as well, like LP has always kind of been sort of stood in the shadow as a rapper of Killer Mike, because Killer Mike is they're both seasoned veterans of the rap world. Like they've both been rapping for decades, but Killer Mike has always kind of clearly stood out as the technical wunderkind of the rapping aspect. But this is, I think, LP's greatest turn as a rapper yet, this record. Like he has incredible verses here. His wordplay and delivery and flows are better than they've ever been, whereas Killer Mike is just like as good as he's ever been. LP is just pushing himself more than ever before. What else? Yeah, like LP's like rhyme schemes and has some really verbose wordplay on the track Holy Calamifuck specifically that I really liked. That was a really great turn for him. There was another song as well that felt like it was his song, like his moment to shine. I just can't remember which one it was. I'll get to it probably when I'm going through my notes. It was that track. Holy Calamifuck is LP's track to shine. Like I think it's the one where he really like proves himself as a rapper on that song. I think I generally agree with the consensus that Goonies versus E.T. is not one of the strongest tracks on the record, but I still really, really like it. I think the reason why it's not one of the strongest ones for me is just that I don't find the beat as compelling on that song as it is on other tracks on this record. But I mean, it's really a small nitpick. There's Killer Mike has a really like one of the better. Like, there's so many great political verses on this record. Obviously, it's their most political record, but there's a really good one from Killer Mike on this track, I think, that might get overshadowed. There's great. I love the way that this track also kind of taps into the superhero or like this overarching theme of the record, which kind of really leans into their connection to the world of kind of like superhero movies and like that kind of whole aesthetic with the whole Yankee and the Brave thing. And this track kind of links that to the hip-hop world really nicely because it kind of ties in references to a lot of the big golden age hip-hop titans like Public Enemy and the Wu-Tang Clan. There are like lines in this track and across the record that mention those two specifically and other kind of hip-hop titans, and it kind of ties them into the superhero ethos / mythos of the record, which I think is super cool tie-in. I really appreciate that. What else is there to say about Walking in the Snow that hasn't already been said? I love the subtlety of the metaphor in Gangsta Boo's hook. Like it's such a subtle metaphor that you could very easily overlook it. But it's a really kind of quite poignant metaphor. This idea of walking in the snow, like obviously being overwhelmed and surrounded in a world where most people are white, obviously, and you're kind of the minority, and the unrelenting difficulty of that. And I also just want to point out as well, like some of you have touched on the specific bars that and things that Mike says in his verse here, but I also want to just throw my admiration at how thrillingly the whole verse is constructed. He has flow switch ups. He has really like fascinating rhyme schemes, and there's a real adept storytelling progression, like an escalation, like a beat to beat movement within the verse that culminates and climaxes in that final bar of the verse about Jesus being murdered by the state, which is the slap in the face finale to the whole song. It's just very, I think, easy to like. It's easy to get so swept up in how good his bars are, and overlook just how much of a craftsman he is in terms of the way he constructs and utilizes storytelling, utilizing storytelling techniques and that kind of thing to make his music all that more compelling. Just Money has a. Sorry, Morgan.
Sorry, this is a very quick point, but I just want to say that this album is like practically a literary masterpiece. It's just.
I think I still love the rest of the record, but I do think that it dips a little bit in the second half, just a little bit. I think part of that though is also a conscious decision to bring the energy of the record down a little bit, just because after Walking in the Snow particularly, that kind of and just that kind of becomes necessary, I think, to stop the record from becoming too overwhelming. And it's a record arc that they have kind of used on pretty much.
I'll just wait till we get to Black Dresses for overwhelming.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at every Run the Jewels record, there's an arc of progression within the structure of each record where they kind of come out the gate really, really, really hard, and then towards the end of the record they kind of get into the kind of some of the more moodier, introspective stuff, and they do that here as well. But kind of before we get to that, I do want to talk about Just a little bit. Just Money, or Just however you want to say it, has one of the best beats on the album. I really love the beat on that track. It's so super good. Obviously, the look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar line is very kind of hard hitting. I do feel though that it loses some impact by virtue of being repeated a lot of times during the song. Maybe that's just me, but it kind of feels like it would have hit harder if it were said once, twice, maybe 3 or 4 times, but it's said, I think, dozens of times, like at least a dozen times, and it kind of feels like it's being hammered a little bit to the point where it loses some of its impact, even though it's a really great line. That's my only real criticism of the song, which is otherwise fantastic. I think Mike has a flow on the first verse of the song that I am not as keen on as his other flows, but I think that's more of a personal preference thing. Lyrically, it's fantastic and as well constructed as ever. Never Look Back. I love the beat on this song. It's a nice come down. Like I said, it's a come down from the energy of the last few tracks. It has these ethereal backing vocals, this song, that are really gorgeous and unsettling, I think. I didn't even hear them the first time I heard the track. It's really good. I want to shout out, The Ground Below has this fucking awesome Gang of Four sample. The song Ether from Gang of Four's album Entertainment, which if you haven't heard is a fucking classic album that you should all hear from the 80s. Such a cool sample, and that song also has one of my favorite hooks on the record too. I love the hook on The Ground Below. It's so good. And also
it's one of the most fun songs on the album, to be honest.
I also if you just give me a sec, I'm gonna bring up the lyrics, because I think that LP's verse on The Ground Below is some of the funniest stuff, one of the funniest verses he's ever, some of the funniest lines he's ever written. I just love his verse here. I'm just going to read it because it's not that long, and I just love every line. I'm not going to attempt to copy his flow or anything. I'm just going to read it.
Do
He
it.
says,
Do it.
Born from the ether, I just appeared out a cloud of reefer, screaming, fuck the world, it can drink what's coming out my urethra. I'll slap a dying child, he don't pronounce my name correct. Rules have got to be rules, any exceptions, and I'm not a leader. Think in the box, I'm not getting my fix, then shit is iffy. Fillet a donut hole, wife don't get to the crib and quickly.
He has a line on the record. Yeah, sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry, I'll just finish this. I'll watch my mouth when I'm finished watching y'all suck clout. Don't doubt you put an ounce of that evil on me, I'm flippin' Ricky. I'll give an inch to you simps, I'll never forgive me. Not saying it's a conspiracy, but you're all against me. You see a future where Run the Jewels ain't the shit. Cancel my Hitler killing trip. Turn the time machine back around a century. That's such a funny verse. I just
fucking king
Eminem.
shit.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's in that song, but he does have a line about spilling a pound of his kids on the carpet, which
Oh,
made
yeah,
me
yeah.
laugh out loud.
Yeah,
Eminem.
This man said simps, and
he's
it
very,
worked.
very vocal
Honestly,
about-
August hit the nail on the head. Eminem could indeed never. I feel like
Yeah.
his ethos is basically like Run the Jewels is Eminem if Eminem was consistently good.
Yeah,
Except
maybe.
he's
Well,
never
I
made an
mean-
album as good as any of the Run the Jewels albums. But
Nope.
heyo.
Hey-o. Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah, I do love that L has offered so many bars about sex and particularly how much he likes eating pussy. So
What a king! Like, have you seen his
He's
girlfriend?
a considerate lover, you know.
he's
Good man.
definitely a
Good
generous
man.
lover from what he tells us, I suppose. But I mean, I believe it.
Look, him bragging about that, like, normalize making bars about eating women out. Do
Yeah.
it.
Normalize
Do it.
eating pussy.
Danny
and
Brown,
don't
I
mean
will
August
type
cat.
Anyway,
DJ
last
Khaled
two
found
tracks.
dead.
As I was saying, like reduction of energy on the second half, but last two tracks are probably the best two on the record. I think I'm glad that Morgan brought up Pulling the Pin straight away, because I think that is basically the most important song on the record in terms of thesis statement, and in terms of outlining what they're about, what they're clinically basically a clinical takedown of capitalism, and also making a case for physical action as necessary in an age of online activism. Online activism is fine, it's great, like getting your message out there is one thing, but you need to also be, if you're able, you need to also be physically making yourself, putting yourself.
Yeah, the
out
line
there.
about a Twitter rant is cutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Twitter rants all get from you.
I think Mike has one of his best verses on the album on that song, Pulling the Pin. And yeah, and then of course the closing track, I think it's already been spoken about. I love obviously the way that the beat on the track is just gradually builds is really, really, really captivating. Lyrically, it seems like obviously the song is the culmination of the record, but it also has this energy of being like as if it's a culmination of the duo as a whole. Like it's the whole project of Run the Jewels has been building to this song. In a sense, both Elle and Mike are on the top of their game, and they rap almost as if it's the last time they might get to rap, which is like what the title I think refers to, this idea of like your last words before being shot. I want to shout out, Mike's got an incredible verse here. I know someone's already pointed that out, but I love the way he talks about his relationship with his mother in this verse especially. I think is quite powerful. I can't even attempt to capture the how moving and affecting it is. You just have to listen to it really. But I do want to say my biggest nitpick for this whole album is that I really, really hate the outro at the very end of the song. I'm sorry to say it.
That's so good though.
I'm sorry to say it. I'm sorry to say it, but I hate as soon as that you're the brave, you're the and the not even that, but like before that, the trailer voice stock lines about what the fuck does he say? It's
These are two guys on the run.
Yeah, it just sounds like a really bad movie trailer, and I hate.
But that's the point,
That's
though.
why I like it.
Why
I know,
it's so
I know.
funny.
Like, I get the point of it. Like, I get what it's intending to do. It just reminds me of bad movie trailers that I hate.
Fair enough.
And I just also think that you're the brave is really fucking annoying as well. I
that
just think
part
that.
was so funny.
The thing that really bugs me about this is that it's attached to the rest of the song. I wish it was its own outro separately, because it kind of ruins the impact of the rest of the song by being attached to it. Like, I get the thematic purpose of it and the way it kind of ties back into the start and all that. It just kind of it's like taking a shit on a wedding cake. It's like it's just it's
like rain on your wedding day, or a free ride when you've already paid.
I get that they don't want to end the record on a dour note, because it's like in a lot of ways a very dour song, but it's just super annoying. Like the Yankee and the Brave superhero thing it is a cute concept, and they execute it thrillingly. I didn't even mention the opening track of the record. It's
Great.
super thrilling. Like the storytelling on that song is like so good. That's exactly the kind of expression of that superhero movie theme that I enjoy. I don't enjoy the cheesy trailer parody. I'm sorry, I just don't, and it makes me.
I mean, I liked it even
into
with it on the I liked it even with it on the emotional thing, because what it felt like was if the whole album was like a culmination of a journey through all of this, it starts with how it starts, with a couple of really fun upbeat songs, and it's just like it's gradually getting darker and darker and more serious, and it ends like that. It feels like that is almost their way to be like, this was all entertainment. It was just a show. We're glad you came. Like
Remember what this is.
Yeah,
it was like bowing at the end of a play,
Yeah, and I actually really like that idea, like as a way of ending the record. I just don't like the way that their execution of it sounds. But conceptually, I think it's a great way to end a record. It just needed to be a little bit.
Maybe if it was its own separate track, you might have liked it more. Or
well, I would have felt that it made more sense structurally if it was carved out from the rest of the song as a separate thing. But I mean,
that's fair. Okay.
But yeah,
No.
It's at least really.
At least you're not dissing the Ooh La La sample.
No, I like the Ooh La La sample actually. I like it. I genuinely like it. So
I have a question to the people in here, just because this is a very specific thing. It's not like a point really about the quality of the album, but on the sort of hook that Mavis Staples brings to the song, what the fuck is it called? Pulling the Pin. On Pulling the Pin. Did anybody else think that, like, the delivery of that, did that remind them of George Clinton on the opening track of To Pimp a Butterfly?
No.
Like at the very end where he's like, make sure you look both ways before you cross my mind. Like that delivery is exactly the same.
That is
I can't say that it came to mind. But
yeah, I can't.
Now I will never unhear that. Thank you.
I would say with the Ooh La La sample, it's not the Ooh La La.
Oh,
it's the Ah Wee Wee.
No, you can't save yourself from this. This is just a bad take.
Yeah,
it's over.
All right.
Just explaining myself, I suppose. I'm not trying to save myself.
I gotta get into the brief point.
I like if it was done by a different singer, I'd be fine with it. But it's just they're like really aggressive voices, like Ah Wee Wee. It's just like stop.
It's so much fun.
August wanted to say something?
Yes, I did. I wanted to say this before we get in. First off, well, actually, now we'll go into 2 points because you've mentioned Ooh La La. In that music video, I don't know if you guys watched
I haven't seen it.
But there's this guy in it who looks, and it could easily be like a composite of their two faces.
I already know this is going to be funny.
But there's this guy who looks like if Killer Mike ate LP. And it's the weirdest thing. It looks so... And I'm pretty sure it's the guy who the sample is from, but it's like this. It's like this computer composite of his face, and it looks so weird.
I have to look this up, man.
Anyway,
my real point is that back to back, the two hip hop records we've talked about, Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemist's Alfredo and RTJ4, have both referenced Wu-Tang Clan and Gil Scott-Heron. In fact, they have the same Gil Scott-Heron reference. And I don't bring this up as a point to say one ripped the other off, because that's clearly not the case, because those two are two very foundational points for hip-hop. But my point is, the contrast in the quality of these records and how we are talking about them back to back.
Did Tyler discover it?
Yeah, I found it.
Can you send that into the chat, please?
Oh, I'm just watching the music video. I'll take a screenshot.
Please do.
Please do. Am I not wrong?
I don't think I would have said that if I had seen it myself and not heard that. But after you have said it, I kind of see it.
Okay.
The top comment on the video is Killer Mike be dressed like Google Chrome.
Sometimes YouTube comments are valid.
No.
Sometimes.
As we shall see later, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Oof.
That's good. So
calling out the bots.
True.
Hate to see it.
Hey, wanna be friends? That's every single bot comment I get. Is hey,
And then
wanna be
I
friends?
wrote the same thing in the comments.
It's like the same 6 comments.
Cinema.
I
Hey.
feel like we should do ratings now.
Yeah, we should do ratings. Let's switch around and go back to our original order. And
Hell.
sorry,
Listen,
I want to dial up for a
I was
sec.
about to say I want to sample that.
That is like I swear to God, that's like a beat on a clipping album. And if it's not, it should be. But I love this record a lot. It's one of my most listened to albums this year, just from the 2 weeks I've been listening to it. I think it is fantastic. My 3 favorite songs from it are probably Out of Sight, Walking in the Snow, and A Few Words for the Firing Squad. And I hate to leave out Pulling the Pin, but that is a close 4th place. And my least favorite track is Goonies vs. E.T. That being said, I will give the album a strong, solid, hefty 8.5 out of 10.
Word.
All right. So, anyways, my turn. And now, my thoughts on this album are, favorite tracks. I'd have to put one. I'd say probably "Ooh La La," just a great banger song. "Walking in the."
What are you doing?
"Walking in the Snow" is another good one, and "A Few Notes for the Firing Squad" is another equally great song. Least favorite, though, I'd have to say probably going to mirror the sentiment of E.T. versus Goonies, and I would give it a solid 7 out of 10, with the possibility of it becoming an 8 on further lists.
7+ score from August. Ring the bells.
Okay. So
Ghana.
I've
I wonder
Yeah,
what Morgan's gonna say.
this is a good album. That's what I have to say about that.
Good
Three
out of
favorite tracks are "Pulling the Pin," "A Few Words for the Firing Squad," and "Never Look Back." And least favorite tracks are "Not Available." It's
no.
not there.
What?
There are none. Psych. Yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 record. I don't know.
Oh my God.
shit!
We got a
Oh my
first
God.
new
Wow.
record with a 10.
Wow.
And it
Oh
won't
my
be the
God.
last. It won't be the last.
I love
This is a
I love how the
landmark.
I love how the prickly Morgan of all people is the first person to not only give a 10,
Yeah, I know, right?
but 2 10s on our main show.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
God, I mean, at this rate, I might just give every record next episode a 10.
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
That won't happen.
I'm not-
That won't happen.
I mean, you
Literally.
really
You're if you give a 10 to Phoebe Bridgers,
If you give a 6 to Phoebe Bridgers, I'll be over the fucking moon.
Yeah, I mean, really.
yeah.
Over the fucking moon song.
Oh,
It's a good song, mood song. I like that song.
Anyways, so
No
me.
comment.
Right. So I really like this record. I still feel like the songs, even though the individual lyrics and the flows are really good, just structurally aren't as tight as I have come to expect from the duels. And I don't just not like Ooh La La because of the sample. I just think some of the lines are less good, but it's fine. Like I said, I don't dislike any of the songs on this record. My 3 favorite are just "A Few Words for the Firing Squad" and "Walking in the Snow" in that order, and my least favorite is "Ooh La La."
Ooh
and
La La, more like.
yeah, and I'll give the record an 8.
Oh, wow.
very good.
This might be our highest rated. Tyler,
It
don't
is
mess
so
this
far.
up.
Saoirse giving a non-rock album an 8 or above is also cause for celebration so far. Like every single score we've had so far has been one indicative of quality.
Like,
Tyler,
if anything,
you have
this was
to
a
uphold
negative
it.
take from Jake today that he didn't give it a 9.
This album,
Yeah, I guess so.
this album's quite good. Do enjoy it.
Really?
Yeah. I know I said that I said in my big spiel that like the two best tracks were the last two, but I'm just gonna be chaotic and like not include
pull
either
a
of them in
pin?
my top three, because I really hate the outro to Few Words, as I said. And Pulling the Pin is like lyrically incredible, but it doesn't have one of the stronger beats on the record. But my top three will be Yankee and the Brave, Out of Sight, and The Ground Below. Just because that song deserves a shout out, I think. And
It
my
do.
rating will be a very emphatic 8 out of 10.
Right, that is our highest scoring one.
Oh shit!
As
Um,
it should
An
be.
8.3. This is like,
Yeah.
dang.
Our previous highest scoring one was Rosenstock on an 8, and this is an 8.3.
Oh damn!
Yeah.
Yeah. Currently, collectively, we think this is the best album of the year.
I
And
mean,
it might
Not a
not
bad
even
pick
be
at all.
it's
I
like
mean,
not
like,
close
what
to my
a-
top
honestly.
10, but it's still very good.
I think it is actually my number 10 so far this year.
Where is it for me? God.
I think it's my
Jules.
number
It's my
4
number
at
10
this
as well.
point.
Oh shit!
Maybe my number 5, but I'm not.
All
It is
right, so
currently-
I want.
Yeah, I have a 7.
I haven't even put it
I
on
just
my
want to
list.
say I want to introduce black dresses, but I'm
Okay.
going to need more alcohol for that because I have things to say.
Saoirse has done her research regarding
second,
because
I
this
will-
band has a special set of circumstances around it. This record, obviously, being Black Dresses, Peaceful as Hell. I will relent from any more details on the album because Saoirse is probably going to deliver them to us.
This is about to be the worst criticism I ever give.
Okay, so black dresses, Canadian band of a genre or many. I would probably call them noise music.
Noise duo.
They're like noise pop, but their albums touch on everything from like metal to punk to lots and lots of sounds, to pop to bedroom pop to singer-songwriter to lots and lots of stuff. They recently, this is their fourth album, they recently broke up, and they took all their music off of Spotify because what happened was a song from their first album called In Their Mouth, which was about childhood sexual abuse. Should probably put a content warning at the beginning of the podcast for that. But it was about childhood sexual abuse. It became viral on TikTok as people, teenagers, cosplayed a anime video game called Danganronpa. This was how the band really broke. But these were teenagers doing pretty sexualized cosplay on TikTok for the song, which is about childhood sexual abuse. And lots of teenagers began to follow the lead singer on Twitter, where she had posted some sexual images. And people criticized her for having these sexual images on when she's mainly followed by children, even though this happened afterwards. And basically this escalated to the point where the lead singer felt like her emotional safety was being threatened by the harassment she was getting. And they released a statement about this, and I looked into sort of the backstory of what happened, and this is what happened. And I have several things to say about this before we get into it. The first of which is, I can understand a teenager making the kind of immature decision to do a sexualized cosplay to a song about childhood sexual abuse, but it is not aesthetic. It is not cool. It does not make you more goth or whatever you're trying to do. It's not an acceptable thing to do for the sake of an aesthetic. And then for people to go after the lead singer for that. Thing is, as someone who considers themselves a trans woman, I can't help but think that the societal bigoted trend of seeing trans women as sexual perverts played into this. And I think everyone who went after Devi and everyone who did that TikTok thing should be thoroughly ashamed. And if those teenagers grow up and look back on what happened, I hope they've grown up a lot in that time. This album is really, really good. It's really, really good. A lot of the songs, like Peaceful as Hell, even more sobering in that context, even better, even more emotionally penetrating, even more full of joy. Actually, that's the thing I really have to say about this album. Like, it's dark, it beats you, it's pummeling, but it is ultimately transcendent and fundamentally joyous. I don't know where to start. If I show you my notes, it's just lines and lines and lines and lines and lines. This album, I don't think this album is as good as Love and Peace for Stupid Little Bitches, but it's really, really, really good. Yeah, that album just has like more pop appeal that appeals to me. This album has many of the same attractions. I think so many of the songs could be read as being about trans femininity, and the fact is, they specifically tried to make every album after the first one not about personal subjects like childhood sexual abuse, which the lead singer had suffered. But that kind of trauma is alluded to, but in a way where I think anyone who has struggled can relate to it. Just to run down the list of songs on this album that I think are really great. They're all really great, but the ones that are exceptional, I would say Impossible Dream, it's like pop from hell. It's like short and sweet. And it's like glitchy and noisy, and I really love it. I love Scared to Death. The guitars are insane. Again, Please Be Nice. I think that's going to be one of my favorite songs of the year by the end of this. I think 10 years down the line, if we're still doing this podcast and we do an end of 2020s podcast, it's going to be in my top songs of the decade. I love Preview because it starts off being like acoustic instruments. What? And the end is like I've just walked out of a techno metal gig where they've just gotten some band off the street who look like they're vaguely capable and just gave them synths to play with. I love it to pieces. When the synths first come in, I wrote down that it's orgasmic because it is. Anyway, I don't want to go on for too long, but I will say that basically what I've said applies to pretty much every song on this record. There are a couple of songs that I feel like are as good, but in general, this touched me in a very personal place. I loved it the first time I listened to it, but I felt like it was just a bit too pummeling for my taste, is why I gravitated so much towards Stupid Little Bitches, because it has more of a pop appeal, I think. And I hate to say this because I try to separate art from artists as much as possible, and sort of art from the background of art, because I like to appreciate art on its own terms. I know that's not always possible. This, unfortunately, is one of those places where it's not really possible, because as soon as I heard about the backstory, re-listening to this album, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's just really good. Whoever wants to leap in next, please leap in.
I think I will go next just because I am going to make the presumption that I'm going to echo your thoughts more so than pretty much anyone else here. I could be wrong, but yeah, you pretty much touched on the backstory behind this record perfectly. Like, I don't really have anything to add to that. I think the two of us, Saoirse, have an interesting dynamic with this record because you obviously have more of the being a trans woman, you obviously have more of the personal connection to the themes and to the personalities and to the experiences that are not necessarily all the experiences, but just kind of like obviously being trans informs this record in a way that you cannot avoid that. You can't look around it. It's just part of the record's personality and part of what it is. Whereas I have more of the connection to kind of the musical precedents for this record in terms of like the scene that it comes from, the sounds that have influenced it, and what it kind of represents in terms of progression in their discography and the progression of the wider scene of experimental, post-ironic, ultra-sincere subversion of pop that it kind of has been born out of. And so, having listened to all of Blake Dress's music, I have not yet dug into the solo material of Devi and Ada, who I understand are both prolific solo artists and have released numerous, like a large number of records, either under their solo name or under different artist names with other collaborators. Yeah, they're both. That's a thing to appreciate, that despite being fairly young, they're both incredibly prolific young musicians. And I think that from what I've heard and with kind of my understanding of the scene that they come from, I think this is their most developed, most forward-thinking, most refined, and generally just greatest overall achievement yet. I think this is truly the culmination of I'd say 3 or 4 years of musical development in the underground world of this kind of surreal, subversive, and also heavily kind of LGBTQ plus filtered music. This very much feels, I mean, along with the other record, which it bears some sonic similarities too, but also a lot of differences. But the other record that it kind of is also similarly emblematic of the development of that sound is Sophie's record, Oil of Every Pearl's on Insides. That's a record that comes from a somewhat similar place, I think, if not sonically, then at least in terms of, certainly thematically in some ways, but in terms of kind of this incorporation of a harsher, noisier aesthetic as a part, that has kind of become entwined with how a lot of LGBTQ plus artists express themselves musically in recent years. Like it's an aesthetic that's irrevocably tied to that experience and existing as a queer person in musical spaces, specifically pop spaces. So all that said and done, let's actually talk about the record.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a fantastic album. I think it's, as I said, I think it's their best and certainly the most accomplished work yet. It develops thrillingly, I think, from all 3 of their previous records. It takes elements of all of them and pushes them to the fore and challenges them in really interesting ways. I think it is their best sounding record yet in terms of having the most feeling like it's they've kind of developed a more of a mastery of their sound play, a mastery of the instruments and the synthesizers and the software that they're working with. It just sounds so much crisper and clearer and more like almost like a major label in a sense. Like it's as if it's as if they've gone major label even though they haven't. Like it just feels like such a progression for me. I think that pretty much every song here I love, honestly. I don't think there's a single song here I don't like.
Agreed.
But there are like the vast majority of the tracks on this record I genuinely love dearly, and I'm just gonna I won't talk about all of them because the thing is, like, it's listening to this record is such an emotional experience for me. Like with in contrast to something like RTJ4, where I can be a little bit more analytical and take lots of notes about technical aspects of the music. Here, it's just more experiential, the effect this has on me. Although I can obviously talk to some of the reasons why I think it sounds good. But I think, Saoirse, you mentioned that the record has a kind of atmosphere of, or like a theme of solidarity, of positivity, of the words escape me, but like whereas a lot of their music deals with oppression and hatred and self-loathing and dysmorphia and all those kinds of things, this is a much more kind of like celebratory record. There are a lot of songs here that dig into the healing elements of their friendship, the healing elements of their relationship together. Like most pertinently, obviously, there's a song here titled "Beautiful Friendship," which is a classic sounding Black Dresses song. It could fit in on any of their records. It's one of their best songs, I think. Ada has some really, like, all over this record in certain spaces, but really especially here, she has some really great black metal sounding screams that are just super like cathartic and just
some of the best she's done, really.
I especially love the part where the song just breaks down and she's just screaming "future burning bright, future burning," and I just love those lines.
Just to touch on the beautiful friendship, there's a line that's really pertinent to that. It's almost like a rapping at points, but she says, "It's all we have," and I think that's really pertinent to what you're saying. I don't mean to interrupt you. There's something I forgot to say that I think is really important, if that's okay.
Yeah, go.
And it does tie into stuff you said, because you touched on the fact this is an inherently queer record, and also the fact that it's part of like the simultaneously ironic and sincere art movement. And I just want to use that to touch on some of the queer themes that I see in this thing. It's interesting that we are all the age we are, because we are like, aside from August, who's properly Gen Z, we are all on the border between millennial and Gen Z, and that style is really of the Zoomers. But I would just say that in the specific vocal styling that they do on this record, I almost feel like it's an attempt to mock the idea of performative gender in a way, because it's super exaggerated feminine. On the song I'm a Freak, so I'm always freaking out, which is an amazing song. She keeps repeating, I'm so cute and well adjusted, over and over and over again, in that way that it's so, to tie it back to what I said at the beginning, almost in the way that like people who dub over anime waifus do. And as someone who's about to start transitioning, that touches on a lot of feelings for me. So it's like, I know she doesn't always sing like that, because in the second half of the record, that's fucking gone. But it's performed, it's evidently satirical. There's also touching on something deeply sincere about the trans experience, which I think that's a nice little texture for the album. And now I'll pass it back to Tyler.
No, that was a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because you're right. There is definitely satirical elements to their music here as well, and there always have been. In fact, satire is kind of like a lot of not just black dresses, but a lot of music kind of in this vein is kind of satire is kind of wielded as a weapon, I think, to kind of ask provocative questions about gender expression and about stereotypes about gender and about stereotypes about trans people. Yeah, it's definitely something that they are consciously utilizing here, and it's very effective. And I can't say it any better than you did.
Thank you.
I also want to shout out the song. It's hard for me to pick a favorite song here. I don't know that I have one, but one big contender is the song "Scared to Death."
Love it. Love it.
I think it's an amazing song. The guitar sample on this song is fantastic. Just to talk about instrumentally, like, it's just awesome. And the vocals sound really, really great. And lyrically, this is such a poignant track. I think there's so many like lines here that I think are just emblematic of the record as a whole, and of Deviant's personalities, or at least the personalities that they choose to depict in their music. Lines like "scared to death of the seams that you try to ignore," that kind of repeated refrain of "we're going to find out what it's going to be about, we're going to see its true form," and you could interpret these lines. They're sufficiently ambiguous that you could interpret them in any number of ways, but evidently, like, I could see it in terms of being from the perspective of themselves, or from like pre-transitioning trans people who are like nervous about the experience of transitioning and finding out what that experience is going to be like, or like avoiding or being terrified to come out because of the seams you try to ignore, the perceived like fear that like no one will ever be able to see you the way that you want to be seen, or the way that you see yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you could alternatively read those lines as being from the perspective of someone else looking at them, like, we're going to see its true form, the choice to use the it pronoun in that instance. And then the line, "I always hope for the best in people," it's just like has this weirdly kind of upsetting effect, or like coming off the back of all of that as well. Like, you're hoping for
the way she talks about trying to see the best in people and always being let down but still trying is like, it's tragic. And you could read that as something that is sad, but I don't. I think that it's kind of beautiful to be the kind of person who is, because I feel like I'm that person. It's like always let down by life, but you still, I hope you guys think I'm an overall positive person, at least. Like, I do. I think I try to see the beauty or the joy in the world. And like, I make no secrets. Life has kicked me in the nuts numerous times. So that's how I look at that. But I could see how a more nihilistic person would look at that differently and get something different out of it.
Yeah, and like what it represents for me is like a lot of criticisms of this kind of like post-ironic hyper pop or noise pop sort of stuff is that there's no real poetry in it, that it's kind of all very blunt, and that the satire is like incredibly blunt and just difficult to like engage with. But I think there's a real poetry here to a lot of the lyricism. I think that that's undervalued, and that is overlooked for whatever reason, whether it's in terms of like perceptions or that are placed on artists like Devi and Ada because of stereotypes or whatever. But there is a real poetry here, and I mean that kind of poetic and powerful lyricism continues onto the next song, Express Yourself, as well, which is another song which is basically like every single line is like, oh my god, this is so relatable, I want to just die. Like, you know, how do we get to the world inside our heads is the hook on that song, and it's such a, you know, like it's sufficiently universal sounding that you could apply it to your any kind of personal experience, but it also kind of reflects a very specific theme of the record that Ada and Devi and of their music that they kind of explore. And yeah, I don't really need to get any more into it than that. That's so basically those are my kind of thoughts on lyrically the record. In terms of the instrumentals on the record, in terms of the sound of the record, sorry, I'll try not to go for too much longer, but I do have a couple more things I want to say. I think aesthetically, this if this is your kind of entry point into this kind of style of music, which I suspect it may be for at least one or two people here, it is challenging sonically. It certainly is. Even I struggle with it a little bit the first time I heard it, adjusting to some of the whiplash sonic decisions on the record. That said, I think it's probably maybe their most accessible record. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. We could debate that. But
yeah, I mean, I look at it kind of like
oh dear,
some really, really violent horror films, or even like Tarkovsky movies, where like even though they're so either formally difficult or difficult with the content, something like Martyrs, even like that's a rough movie, but what it's fundamentally driving at is something that is life affirming, really. And I find those kind of movies like physically transcendent. Like I find the kind of emotional torpor they put me in through their format and their content, it puts me actually in a place of fundamental joy that I can't really explain. But I think it's anyway, that's what I'd say to that.
No, I love that you said that, because that's exactly the experience I get from this record is that sense of like transcendent fundamental joy. I think one track I haven't even talked about that might actually be my favorite on the record, which is the opening track, Left Arm of Life, which is just a fucking incredible opener. It's a gorgeous song about friendship, about love, about self-improvement, about the development of courage in a fucked world, basically.
All that we can do is try again.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of it's really like significant in the way that it announces a fresh, new, bold step forward for them sonically, as well as in terms of this attitude of putting some of the irony wielded as a shield behind them, and just being a little bit more vulnerable on this record, which they are. I love the hard-hitting, distorted alarm synth driving beat of Damage Suppressor. I think that song is just fantastic. I love the eclectic, busy, but gorgeous production of Angel here. It has a great pop song vocal performance from Devi on the hook, but also then kind of devolves into frenetic noise in the outro that's actually quite elegantly constructed, I think, that I overlooked the first time I heard it. And just on the note of noise as well, I don't really think of this as a noise record, or any kind of subgenre of noise. Like there are elements of it that kind of take from noise pop, and like there are certainly parts of that record that sound noisy, but I don't believe that it's really like a noise record in any sense. It's noise is just one of the kind of many toolbox toys that they utilize to fill their canvas, basically. It's a real mixed metaphor there, but you kind of get what I mean. It's just a one particular like color on a palette full of different colors. There's so many all over this record. And obviously Please Be Nice is a key track that has developed a particularly resonant poignancy since the record has been released. In fact, it's really like tough actually, like how close that breakup was to the release of this record. Creep You is probably the most like immediate track on the record in a lot of senses. It's probably what a lot of the kind of like 100 geeksy people were kind of expecting / looking for in this record, is a song like that. And I mean, I think it's to the record's credit that it has so much more sonic variation and polish than that record has at all. And I think I kind of like feel like shit for even making that comparison, because it would really bug me if anyone else compared this record to that one, because it would be such a cheap comparison, because they don't really share much similarity at all. I also want to point out, because I have to point this out because it's like so on brand, but Creep You's noise breakdown in the second half has the very same it has the very same kind of overheating CPU quality that Sophie's Whole New World has. And of course, that song and Creep You's noise breakdown are both directly influenced by, who's going to guess the next word out of my mouth?
Autechre?
Yes, yeah. There's like direct sonic borrowing there, because Sophie said explicitly that their music influenced Whole New World, and it's kind of a chain of influence there as well. So like it's quite, yeah. Anyway, I just had to bring that up because they have a very similar kind of timbre and sonic quality. And I also like the understated gorgeous closer to the record 666 as well. I like the fact that it almost ends in laughter, like it ends in a kind of moment of levity between Devi and Ada, like some studio chatter, and it's such a like sweet moment of kind of like calm that ends the record, and it kind of ends the record on and now that is the end of their career essentially, like that song is the last song that their original song they're going to release, at least unless they reform, which considering the number of different projects they have going doesn't seem likely anyway. But like it's such a sweet and poignant moment to end on, that they, I'm sure, never probably had no idea was going to be the end for them. But yeah, I love this record to pieces. I love it more with every listen. I've listened to it at least 10 times probably since it came out. It's their masterpiece. It's a hell of a record to bow out on, and it's I think the peak of years of progression in an underground genre, and I think it deserves the love that it's getting.
Yeah, I mean, they spent 4 albums perfecting the sound, and they bow out on the one that, well, again, not the one I'd go to regular listening the most, but the most complete iteration of that they're ever going to do.
Yeah.
I think if they're going to bow out at any time it's appropriate, it's now.
Yeah, but I mean, also, like I said, they still have lots of work on other projects and solo work. So this is not obviously going to be the last time they make music. So people shouldn't be discouraged from checking out their future music from them just because it's not black dresses.
100%. So we've spent a while talking about how much we love this album. In true Jamson T tradition, I expect August to now come in and say how it's awful.
Look, can I actually go next?
Sure.
Please go next, Morgan.
I have a brief thing I need to address, though. Did you guys happen to see a guy who looked almost identical to me, but he was wearing like a black hat? Because
Jesus fucking Christ,
this guy broke into my house and he stole my clothes. That's why I'm wearing this. He broke into my house, stole my clothes, just whipped out a quesadilla.
Hat-wearing motherfucker.
He just started eating this quesadilla in front of me while I was tied up on the floor. And it was the worst. I just had...
Has someone muted him? This is beautiful. I have chosen to believe that God himself muted your audio connection to us, because that was the dumbest bit I have ever in my entire life. I have no words. That is so stupid. It loops back around into being genius.
No, it's just stupid. Morgan, you go ahead.
Okay, so what do you think of the album?
That is also
Oh, I
fair
got my
enough.
clothes back.
Oh my god. What do you think of it, Morgan? Go on.
So there's okay. So one of we've not been doing this podcast for very long, but one of my favorite things about it is that we kind of get a chance to more in depth share our experiences in a more sort of holistic context than we do in, say, like the group chat that this was born out of. And as such, I value everyone here's perspective, and it's introduced me to a whole lot of new ideas, and I've just generally enjoyed all of this, even when we completely disagree. That said, never in my entire life have I felt like sitting in the room where two people are discussing the best party ever that I was not invited to.
Oh no.
Oh, nice. I'm so excited.
I love a good analogy, a good Morgan analogy.
It's a really good analogy.
Because
There is no one better, honestly.
Oh, well, thank you. I have no valid criticism of this album. I just thoroughly do not get it. At no point while listening to it do I understand what is happening or why I am listening to it. I just don't. It's so beautiful that you all have these experiences from this album, and you're able to express that so wonderfully. And I've enjoyed every second of listening to it. My
Thank you.
God, it's like you're speaking Japanese. I don't get.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Morgan, can I take that and run with it a bit?
Well,
Ooh,
was
Tyler? I was just
Did
going to say,
Tyler have
Morgan,
a-
I'd love to hear like even if you feel like that your criticisms aren't valid because you don't have like the musical experience or whatever, I'd still like to hear your actual thoughts like on the songs.
True. I would too.
Okay, so I did, in spite of it all, write down some tracks that I did like.
Mhm.
At least I liked parts of them, because
Mhm.
this album changes on a whim quicker
Yeah.
than anything I've ever heard in my
Quicker than
entire
No Dream by
life.
Jeff Rosenstock, which changes on a fucking whim.
Oh, it puts it to shame. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
Creep
that's
You
right. I
is-
listened to Worry this week too. That was a good album.
oh,
I'm
that's
glad
nice.
you think so.
Great.
Creep
It's
You.
amazing how no one asked.
I thought Morgan's "that was nice" was bad. Holy shit, Tyler. I think August is dead.
No.
Check your pulse.
No, I died long ago.
Sorry, that was a bit.
I died when I died when Reagan
Okay.
became president.
Morgan, talk about
Morgan, please.
those tracks, please.
Okay. I don't know how to follow that. Creep You is probably the most immediate song on the album. Is naturally my
Yeah.
favorite because it's the one I'm closest to understanding.
But you hated the second half, I'm guessing?
It's funny. It just kind of blended together with the rest of the album. I don't.
Okay.
It's just each song there's something I like in, and then 10 seconds later it's something completely different, and I'm thrown for a loop. And if that's your thing, this is a god tier masterpiece, and it's wonderful. But I'm just so thoroughly lost.
It's strange. One of the notes I had written down was it's an album that feels like someone having like an emotional breakdown on stage and I have to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
That's one of the things. There's literally a song, and I can't remember which one, but it starts like a song, and then it stops, and the song goes like, "Oh god damn it!" and then it's a different song for the rest of the song. And it feels like they forgot their lines and started doing it like a Shakespeare play instead. And I love stuff like that, but I can see how you might not get on with it.
Yeah, like the other two that I have written down are Please Be Nice and Maybe This World Is Another Planet's Hell. I just found those interesting from an aesthetic standpoint. I can't really say that I like them because at a certain point I still just don't really understand them. Because I mean, it probably doesn't help that I have absolutely no context with this album. Black Dresses was the next album that we were reviewing this week, and then it wasn't on Spotify. Oh, that's weird.
I would love to see Morgan's face the first time like he hears this album.
Yeah, and then I pressed play on the YouTube rip of it, and I was like, oh,
Actually, that's the
this
point.
is going to be fun.
These songs aren't on Spotify or iTunes anymore, but you can pay for them on Bandcamp, and you should
use them, or you can listen to them on Bandcamp for free.
I know that he's not going to listen to it, but I do think that if anything, Morgan might enjoy Waste Isolation, just because it's a little.
He might. He'd probably enjoy Little Bitches more as well. To be fair.
Okay. I mean, I don't have. Okay, I'll take your word for it. That's really all I have, because it was either 2 or 3 times, maybe like 2.5 in total that I've listened to this, and each time that I've listened to it, it is like throwing myself at a brick wall and expecting the wall to fall over.
I think
Yeah, I get that.
I think the thing is, like, and I wouldn't expect you to do this just because we only have so much time and it takes motivation, but when this kind of thing is new to you, you really have to just listen to it over and over and over until the shock of it is dulled and you can actually piece apart and evaluate the different constituent parts. Like, it's taken me years, like, of listening to music to get to the point where this sounds relatively normal to me. But yeah, you kind of do have to inoculate yourself and just like dull it, dull the shock. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I hope that Morgan would agree this is a better record than Fear Inoculum is.
Oh Jesus, yes. It's at least interesting.
Opposite sides of the spectrum. It's like Fear Inoculum is like listening to NyQuil, and this is like being shot in the forehead with speed.
I'm going to come back to this album when we talk about Farrah Abraham, by the way, because I have comparisons to make.
It is actually a fantastic point of comparison.
It's so fortuitous that this ended up being, we ended up doing both of those.
No, I'm not saying I did this intentionally, but I didn't.
Because again, I don't think this is like, I won't go into any detail, but I don't think this is a record that sounds like that record, but I do think it's a record that, where the influence of that record's belovedness in certain internet circles is kind of felt, because it's kind of drips or like filtered through, or like some bad verb to the sonic palette.
Trickle down economics.
Yeah, like how I would describe it is a lot of the things that the Farrah Abraham is doing.
Economics, bringing
it
back to Ronald Reagan.
A lot of the things that Farrah Abrahams is doing, kind of by accident, that people are gravitating towards. This album does a lot of purpose, and what that means is that where the Farrah Abrahams is migraine-inducing, this is delightful.
I disagree, but I'll get to that in like an hour.
Yeah.
I would like to piggyback off of Morgan, because let me set the stage here, because as Tyler said, when you listen to music of this nature, it is typically best to listen to it to the point where the shock wears off and you can just sort of meet it at face value. And let me tell you, that's exactly what I did. Every single day I was at work, I listened to this album twice. Once at the beginning and once at the end, just to establish some perspective.
You're so committed.
I'm very committed. And
either committed or bored.
Well, I feel like this album occupies the perfect middle ground, right between the Backwash album and the Charlie record. Right in the middle of those two albums.
I can see that. See that.
And I loved.
Tyler, are you okay?
Oh, sorry. I just had a weird thought, and now I can't get it out of my head. It looks like Jake's grabbing a pair of invisible tits. I don't know why that popped into my head, but he just kept doing this with his hands.
I'm very emotive when I speak.
Yeah, you're great.
It's like David Lynch, Eraserhead.
Let the man get through this.
I beat
Sorry, I'm so sorry. Please continue. Please.
In the center is this album. It's sort of a blend of the darkness that I think is found on both of them, sort of the post-irony that is found on both of them, the authenticity and satire that can be found in both of them, as well as the harshness. And as well as like both albums in question have a clear beating heart. There is an empathy for the people who have made them. And this is very true with this album as well. And I feel like, and not to mention the subject matter being so forward about gender identity, like Saoirse, like I immediately expect to connect with subject matter of this nature. And also, not to mention, it's just because I feel like at least of the people on the podcast, I have the taste closest to Tyler. So, that being said, I had no reason to think that I would do anything other than love this album. And maybe it was that expectation that got to me. But I can't help but feel much closer to Morgan in this dynamic, even though I will say many, many positive things about it. I will say the guitar work on this album is fucking exceptional. Every single riff fucking rules and immediately lashes out and punches you in the face, and it's great. And I think when the lyricism is being authentic and when they are speaking from a place of true emotional honesty, it really works for me. The intonation in which it is delivered, there is something uncanny and strange, and I really like that about it. And my three favorite songs on the album, I think, all exemplify this, which are Scared to Death, Please Be Nice, and Express Yourself. And I also just love the inherent idea of taking these struggles and this turmoil and turning it into something tangibly positive, something affirming, which is why I feel exactly like Morgan when I heard you two talking about it. It warmed my icy cold heart, and I felt so happy that that people could connect with this. But boy fucking howdy, I sure didn't. And I for the first time on this podcast, I am terribly worried that I am just going to completely shit the bed on my criticism of this album. That being said, I feel a little bit like Morgan, which is strange because I am far more used to music of this nature that is weird and eclectic and odd and abrasive and just has so many stylistic diverging things coming. And yet, with this album, I am consistently... Okay, it's gone.
We need to locate who is doing that, because it's the worst thing in the world.
It is not unlike some of the production choices on this album.
You're not wrong, but
Not
it's
wrong.
good on this album.
I won't entirely even
Amazing
disagree
on
with that,
Farrah
but
Abraham.
the way this album works is that I love tons of albums like this, so it's weird for me to try and articulate what separates this album from those other albums.
I mean, God, please
And
send
I
me a
think-
playlist of albums like this on Spotify or something.
Oh, I mean, I can do that. And I think the source of it really is mainly in just a sort of law of averages kind of sense. When you are shooting for the moon and dealing with these extreme sound palettes and styles and choices, there is only so many times you can consistently hit the bullseye when you are holding a gun and blindfolded.
Right.
That's kind of the mentality I feel like here, and for every bullseye it hits with someone else, there is going to be a complete misfire on your behalf. And I feel like that's kind of where it was with me, because in listening to this album, I mostly feel lost. I feel like it starts amazingly and ends amazingly, and pretty much everything in between bled together because I had to consistently keep looking for when the tracks had changed on my phone, because I couldn't, if I looked away for a moment, I wouldn't realize a new song was even starting. It just wouldn't register with me. And this made it really hard to identify the structure of so many of the songs, and it just throws me for a loop. And I feel like with Morgan, I identify with like, oh, there's always something about every single song that I like, and then 10 seconds later it's like I'm listening to a completely different song and I'm like, wait, go back to that. I liked that. Can I have like one more moment of that, please? And I just didn't get that. And like maybe that's just more of a me problem. That being said, I think the key to my disconnect with this album, at least on an emotional level, because like the biggest compliment I'll give it is that I think it's immaculately written. The lyrics are fantastic across the board. I don't think there's a single song here that is void of a poignant line or a line that didn't like genuinely hit me. Like Please Be Nice is an amazing song. I love that song. It's great. And I listen to that and I'm just like, this gets to like the root of my childhood, like when I was a small toddler, and my biggest complaint, like the reason I couldn't socialize with people was because I had a complete lack of understanding why people didn't follow the rules and be nice to each other. It just completely eluded me for my entire early childhood, and I feel like I've carried that with me in a sense that I have a fundamental lack of understanding to why people can't like just outwardly try to connect with one another on an emotional level.
What's that mean where it's like, I can't explain to you why you should care about other people?
Yes, it is a song that is pure, raw, and filtered empathy, and it's just like, yes, exactly. And that's why I think with me, and I know this sounds contrary to what I was talking about with the Run the Jewels album, because they do combine sincerity and comedy in a way that I think works. This album, however, whenever they're doing the more satirical stuff, it bounces right off of me. I can't connect with it. And the post-irony just for some reason doesn't work for me. And I think it's just because the chaotic nature of this production just throws me for so much of a loop that I am like desperate to find a hook or a lyric or just something that'll anchor me to a song that I'll just be like, yes, this is the thing that I'm going for here. And then when they do something that is not purely hard on your sleeve, genuine, the thing that I look for the most in music, it just like, I can't. I feel like I am lost, adrift in a sea, waiting for a life preserver, and then I'm thrown one, and then it's yanked back. And it's just, it was phenomenally frustrating, despite the fact that I would say that this album overall is a good album. It's just, we're an album where all of its really good choices do not work for me at all, and I hate that because I wanted to love this so bad.
If I could just speak to the satire thing very quickly, or it's like the only I know the whole album is broadly satirical and sincere at the same time, and that's the Gen Z vibe it's going for. Of course, I'm in the bit in between where I'm just trying to get along and survive. But so the one bit of satire I really responded to was the active over-exaggeration femininity in the vocal performances. They're both trans women. They don't talk like that, but they do it on a couple of songs very pointedly. And that's something that I really responded to because I'm literally about to go and do that.
No, I mean, that's like, I'm glad that resonates with you, but as someone who goes through a not entirely dissimilar struggle, I just wanted that to be rooted in something that felt more straightforward and didn't get that, and I was slightly disappointed, and I tried my absolute hardest to listen to it over and over again so I could latch onto it in that same way, and I just couldn't ever. Like, it was just, I tried over and over and over again, and I just couldn't, and I was so sad because this has the makings of everything that should be Jake core, and it just doesn't.
Jake, I love your passion, and I just don't want you to be sad I don't want you to be too sad or too like feel bad that you can't get into this record, because
I can't help it. I do feel sad.
I know, but I feel that the thing is that you have very much been thrown in the deep end with this album. It's not a good introduction to the sound of this band is not a good introduction to the sound that they're rooted in. They're much.
I mean, it was my introduction.
True.
I suppose, but
that's why I listened to Waste Isolation and preferred it.
Yeah, it's a very good album, Waste Isolation, and it's a very different album. I do think that is the album that most, generally speaking, most people would be best off listening to get an idea of this band.
Mhm.
Not to say that it's the best, or not to say that it's the one everyone will enjoy the most, but generally speaking, I think it's the best introduction to this band. But
Mhm.
I don't think that this band are the best introduction to the sound that they inhabit. I obviously acknowledge that for Saoirse, they very much were a great introduction. But generally speaking, again, for you,
Sure,
Jake, I'm talking, I'm just addressing Jake for this one. I think that you were very much thrown in the deep end, and it can be. I'm very sympathetic to the experience of listening to something over and over and over and over, trying to rack your brains as to what the appeal is. Because I've done that before with lots of records from different genres, like lots of like more extreme, darker metal subgenres, and like weird subgenres of jazz, and like country music as well, to a large extent, has had that kind of effect on me. So I think it's just a poor entry point, and I think that depending on like what happens with the sound, whether it continues to kind of rise to prevalence in the forefront of alternative music, it may be the case that once you're kind of more familiar with the aesthetic of this kind of disjointed, clattering, frenetic production with multiple kind of shifts, like it's very proggy in a sense, I suppose. It's like the queer hyper pop equivalent of the Mars Volta. Like, terrible comparison, but like they kind of have a same
I
thing.
wouldn't necessarily say that's a terrible comparison.
It's kind of
I
the
was
same.
literally about to compare my response to the Mars Volta album I listened to this week,
Yeah,
because it was just like
It's
I
kind of-
responded to them for similar reasons, or it felt unlike anything I'd heard, so I'm immediately fascinated.
I think in terms of a listener response, it's a great comparison, and in terms of sound, it's borderline nonsensical.
Yeah, well, the thing,
That's
all I
true.
meant by that is that they do a similar, both kind of groups do a similar thing of jumping from idea to idea to idea, very much on a whim. It almost seems like on a whim. And the difference is, though, that you're more familiar with, and you're more accustomed to, and you enjoy the aesthetic of the ideas that one band jump from and to, whereas the ideas and aesthetics and sounds of the other band are just something that you don't have a lot of experience with, or just a preference for, or a taste for in your music. Like that.
That's the thing, though, is that I feel like I do. I feel like I've listened to albums like this countless times and have enjoyed it, and evidenced by the fact that I went back and vastly preferred Waste Isolation, even though it's not exactly the same as this. I love all of the things that inspire this record. Like, I love the Sophie album. That's one of the best industrial, whatever the fuck you can even label that album as, albums of the decade. I've listened to that countless times. I love abrasive, like, music in general, and it's just, this album feels like it just shimmies right into the very, very slim column of what I just don't like, I guess.
That's fair. Hey,
It
that's
just
totally
feels a bit
fair.
much
That's
in a way I
totally
Anyway.
don't like. That's
Let's,
it.
let's give August
I would
a
like to
turn.
hear August outside of a bit.
That August, definitely, because he's the only person I did not predict having an opinion for. Everyone else so far has been totally on brand.
He likes that bleep bloop music.
He do.
That
he
is
do.
true.
Yeah. All right. So here's the thing, guys. You
Oh,
gotta
no.
lick it or tick
Oh
it.
no.
You gotta go and get it before it's gone, and hit it quickly as it's begun. Life is short as a midget, but mine's a little LeBron. It's been a minute since Eminem was blonde. I need a peace prize, Mom. Invented the bomb. And then that song gets in. Okay, so my point with doing random disconnected bits throughout this whole discussion was to build up to the point that I think this Black Dresses album is I think it's a decent album. But granted, I think it's a very inconsistent album. Not in the sense that the sonic variety is so different that, like, because obviously that's true. Obviously it's shifting back and forth rapidly between a bunch of sounds, but inconsistent in the sense that you've got songs that are like Left Arm of Life, which is this very slow, not very slow, but like a slower opening as opposed to most of the rest of the record. And I feel it doesn't accurately set the tone that this album is going for. And that's the big thing. It just feels so scattershot in every sound it's going for. It feels so disconnected, but I still think that the key tracks on here, like the aforementioned Left Arm of Life, Beautiful Friendship, like Please Be Nice, Creep You, are fantastic songs. I really enjoy them. But most of this record for me, as has been mentioned, it just unfortunately kind of blends together and becomes this big 46-minute mush of a record. And it is something where, but the thing is, I almost feel that's a double-edged sword of a criticism, because this being the last Black Dresses album we will likely ever get, I almost feel bad in that sense, that I think it's so bloated, because otherwise we may not have ever gotten these songs from these artists. And
Completely agree.
Yeah, and these tracks clearly mean so much to the artists, just because of the production and the vocal performances, which are quite good, even through all of the auto-tune, the layers of auto-tune applied to them. It just, unfortunately, as a whole, kind of, it feels like a record they had a lot of ideas for, but they didn't really parse those ideas down to the best ones or sort them out in a way that was like really like captured what I wanted this record to be, because it's good, it's just a bit too, it doesn't know what it wants to be, is how I kind of feel.
Kind of agree.
But the thing is it's like, I almost feel like it knows exactly what it wants to be, because what it was exactly what I wanted.
No, and that's a fun experience.
And it is, I feel like it is a holistic vision. Because all the songs had the same like artistic stamp on it. Like, I hate to be auteurist about it because I hate that idea, but I feel like all of these songs are birds of a feather. They are feathers from the same bird. And like, to the point where when Creep You started, I was shocked at the sound, because it was so unlike everything that had come before. So we're using really acoustic instruments. And then by the end, I was like, okay, this is a song from this album. It makes sense, I suppose.
Here's what I'll say as like a metaphorical response to that. I think you're right about this album being all feathers from the same bird. I just think it is more feathers from the same species, just different individual birds that have been sorted
I'm
together.
lost in the bird metaphor. I'm sorry.
I don't think I agree.
I get it.
But I don't think I agree. But your opinion is valid.
I want to take a nap.
Anyways,
Okay. Well, I feel
Most
like
on-brand
we've
thing
been
anyone's
talking
ever
about
said
this
on this
for
podcast.
like an hour now. We talked about this record for a while.
Well, I mean, like,
Yeah.
it's only appropriate that an album
Yeah.
that has so much going on inspires a
Yeah.
lot to say.
Absolutely.
And,
But I wouldn't cut anything anyone has said. That's the thing. I wouldn't want anyone not to say anything they have said.
Yeah.
You can cut what I said. I mean,
Go ahead, August. You were saying something?
I was kind of just leading the discussion on to the point of like, are we ready to wrap this up and
Yeah, sure.
I am.
Oh, yeah.
rate
Well,
it?
I am. I've said a lot.
I bet you are, you bright boy.
I get it because the sun.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And because you're a very intelligent individual.
Okay, so Jake assumed.
I don't
host,
know
which
why,
order are we
but
going
coming
in?
from you, that just sounds like condescending. I know it's not. I know it's not. It just, yeah.
Shall we go in our competitive
Tyler
order
is
for the
going to
ratings?
fly from New Zealand to kill August, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, guess what?
Anyway, Saoirse, what did you say?
I was trying to get this on to the point where we could
Yes,
wrap up, but
okay.
ignore me.
Should we
Yeah.
start with, you know what? Should we start with Jake or should we start with Tyler?
Let's do jams and tea.
Jams and tea.
Oh, okay. I'd say
Tea
my
and
three
smudge.
favorite songs on the album are Scared to Death, Please Be Nice, and Express Yourself, songs I really do love a whole lot. My least favorite, I'll be the podcast contrarian here and say my least favorite is Creep You. Didn't enjoy it. And I would give the... I would give the album... I would give the album a light 6. It is good, but it is too scattershot for my liking.
You know,
Fair enough.
I mean, thing is, Jake, you said most of what I wanted to say. I've got some different favorite tracks, those being Left Arm of Life, Beautiful Friendship, and probably Please Be Nice. Least favorite, I'll go for like a kind of random example, but probably Impossible Dream, just because it is like a key track of like being this nothing in the track list that I just do not click with at all. And I would agree with Jake, this is like, it's like a 6 out of 10. It's a good record.
It's higher than I expected from August, so.
Yeah. It's Morgan.
My favorite tracks are not available. My least favorite tracks are not available. My rating is 2 question marks out of 10.
Okay.
Yes.
I put that in the document now.
Thank you. That will be all from me.
You're not going to give it a numerical score.
I mean, gun to my head, I'd give it a 5. But that's
what-
just because I truly did not understand the experience.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Morgan
Should
was
I put a
fed through
5
the
in
life
or the
stream.
question marks?
It just, for some reason, the question marks are bugging me in a like really like pedantic way.
Yeah, just
Okay, I'll put
just go
put a
5
5 in.
just
I don't-
to for
I-
the sake
but
of-
But
Right.
like question mark 5 question mark.
But then the
That's
album
worse.
was like, anyway.
That's so much worse.
No, that's why. It's
All right.
like,
So I'm now gonna try and bump this fucking average rating up some. But my
dear.
number 3 was my
I'm
number
just
3
looking
was
at
I'm
the
a Freak.
average so far.
Yeah, my number 3 was I'm a Freak, so I'm always freaking out. Then it was Please Be Nice. Sorry, there was Creepy and then Please Be Nice. And my least favorite was Maybe This World Is Another Planet's Hell, but it's still a good song. And I'm going to give it a 9.
Nice. Nice.
Thank you.
and
All
like
right.
Tyler's gonna be a simp and give it the same.
Tyler's going to be a simp and give it a 10.
Yeah,
Well, you're both wrong. I'm giving it 9.5.
we're
Knew
half
it.
right.
Oh, blimey.
My 3 favorite tracks. My
Sure.
3 favorite tracks are very difficult to decide on. I will go for Left Arm of Life, Beautiful Friendship, and Scared to Death. And I've already given my rating as a 9.5. Least
Yep.
favorite track is
Next track.
probably Bliss and Stupidity, just because I think it's too long. But yeah, that's really it.
Yeah.
And I think what's nice about this podcast is that we still, after disagreeing pretty substantially on some things, we all still have a beautiful friendship.
Very
I
different
like the
things.
song.
I'm
That
gonna
was
fucking
not
jump
the
off a
joke.
cliff.
That was not the joke.
All right. I need to piss. I'll be back in a moment.
Okay.
I guess on that note, August, the next 2 segments are technically about you.
Oh, they are.
So,
Well,
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
we should wait for Saoirse to get
Yeah,
back.
let's wait for
Okay.
Saoirse.
I have the same.
Oh, I'm so glad someone was recording that.
All right, so now we're talking about a record by a pair of hack musicians from my home state. In fact, I think these guys live really close to me, like on the same block.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, this is from a duo called Glacier Flower, who's been making ambient music since 2018. So, and we're going to talk about them for whatever reason.
Fucking
What do I-
losers.
So,
Well, I mean, most of us are going to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean,
All right,
I guess we
time
should
to-
start by saying that Morgan has not heard it because we were not expressly clear we were going to cover this. When
It's
we
not
probably
like
should have been.
August. It's not like August mentioned the impending release of it multiple times, and then plugged it multiple
Jesus.
times, and we were multiple tweets about it when it was released, and
All right.
talking about it in the group chat.
You know what, Tyler? Shut up. Just shut up. Just shut up. I've had enough.
Am I wrong?
No, I'm at my limit though.
all right. Let me just leap on this and say this is a fucking excellent album.
Yes.
And this is my album, for those who didn't catch on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's August's.
This
August,
is
baby.
Glacier Flower's second album.
Yes.
And I
because
quite
I've not-
enjoyed the first album. Just
Yeah,
to
because
say-
I've known,
Yeah, I've heard that one.
because I've known August a long
You want a
time. I
fucking
listened to the
beetle?
first album when it was released. Children. I enjoyed the first album when it was released. I think though
Sorry.
within my
Sorry.
Okay.
my
Enjoy.
thing about the
What's happening?
my thing about the wait, what's going on? You
Is the
still have
recording
Morgan, but he's
stuff? No.
muted himself.
And
Yeah,
he's
I
turned
think-
off his webcam.
I think
Yeah.
he's being spiteful. Anyway, Saoirse, continue with what you were saying.
Probably
Yeah,
did it too
so
far.
basically, I was just going to say that although I liked the first album, like it sounded like all of the other music within that genre I'd heard. This doesn't. This is a huge stylistic leap forward for me. I think I love the fact that it opens on this wonderful like Japanese kind of soundscape with Japanese instruments. I'm frankly astonished that on such a sort of small budget and crew and sort of production level, this achieves such a rich soundscape and level of orchestration. The intricacy of the mixing and the instruments, and when an instrument will come in compared to another one, it's just so well done, in my opinion. Although the first song does use mostly acoustic instruments, it turns into more simple stuff, which I'm here for. When the drums come in on Bioluminescence Cumulus, I was like, I like this. And then when the pianos came in, I was like, I like this more. I feel like if the first album was like a dip in the toe of the water of making good music, this is like we're jumping in the pool.
Love it.
Good
Love that.
metaphor.
I'll go next if that's all right, unless you have more to say.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, my thoughts are just a bit more disconnected. I like the record a lot. I think it's definitely a step forward from the first one. I think it sounds great. I think the song structures are much more improved and expanded upon, and as are the aesthetics and sound of the record as well. In true on-brand fashion, I'm going to start by shouting out the track that reminds me the most of Ortega, which is the Exploring a Desert Planet atmospherics of Ortega's album Amber, which I don't know if August had heard when he recorded this or not, because I know he's heard it now. But anyway, those kind of aesthetics of like desert planet aesthetics, I felt them on the song Arcadia, which is a really great piece of music. I think it's my favorite piece on the album. I love it. I think it's a beautiful song. I really enjoy the unsettling deep space sparseness of the first part of Bioluminescence. I think that's quite affecting and gorgeous and beautiful. I don't care as much for the second half of the song Cumulus, just because I think that the synth in that part of the song sounds a little bit cheesy and stock sounding. I only point that out because it doesn't sound that way anywhere else on the record. It's just that one part of that song that and that's more of a personal preference thing. I just don't quite care for that specific sound, but love the rest of it. The pluck sounds of Hiroshi, as Saoirse's already mentioned, are gorgeous, as is the ambience on that track. It sounds really rich. I love the gentle wind sounds, like they're really gentle, and I love the fact that they're gentle. They sound like, I presume they're from a field recording, but they sound really nice, and they adds a really nice quality to the ambience. I really love the twisted, stuttering, haunting quality of the song. Honestly, I like that a lot. It's like a haunted piece of lounge jazz that decays into infinity, and it reminds me of like the similarity I wrote down was it was like if the Caretaker covered Basinski's Disintegration Loops. It was, in fact, I wanted to ask August if the Caretaker was a point of influence for this track or generally, because I do hear their stuff in a few places here or shades of their style of that project.
Yeah, the Caretaker was certainly a bit of an influence, whether consciously or subconsciously, especially because Honestly is a song composed almost entirely of like slowed, reverb, stock music, very much in that style.
Yeah, that's Caretaker's thing as well, and I think that the way you did it was a very, very well executed piece of that style of music, and that kind of the shades of that Caretaker style that I pick up are never like distracting. Like it's not like it feels like you're cheaply copying them. It feels like you're just executing your own vision of that style of music, and it reminds me of the stuff that I love, and that's only a good thing. The gentle melody on the song Starlight Somewhere is very Aphex Twin-esque. It reminded me of Aphex Twin, the specific quality of the melody there. And I have another tiny criticism, which is that I think that on that track, the percussion is a little too sharp and clean sounding for the aesthetic of the track. It's good percussion, but it just sounds a little too polished. I think that if it were a little fuzzier or a little more, there is a little bit of distortion on it. It might have just, the contrast between that and the BP melody might have worked a little bit better. That's a minor critique. The closing track, obviously, big finish. It's a big boy.
We still run the jewels for.
Oh yeah. The closing track is very pretty. It's full of gorgeous sound play. It's immaculate. It sounds excellent.
It reminded me of composers like Hans Zimmer and Philip Glass at multiple points, especially Philip Glass.
Yeah, I definitely see the Glass comparison as well.
I just want to touch on some things you've said. With honestly, there's like a really eerie synth lead in there it's not mixed like a lead, it's just mixed like part of the orchestra, but it's doing a lot of the work, and it makes it way more haunting. I love the like John Carpenter vibe of Arcadia almost. This is what I meant, where I felt like with the first one, it felt like a lot of ambient music I've heard, and this one has taken a lot of influences from like everywhere else and bringing it into sort of an ambient album, which I love so much. I mentioned that I think the orchestration is beautiful and intricate and detailed. And what I like about ambient music, when it's really good, is that it teaches you to listen to that kind of detail. And so, like in a way, other albums don't. In other albums, like everything is doing work you're not meant to notice. Good ambient music for me is like if I sit there and listen to it, it's like the music is teaching me to hear it in more detail. And this album does that.
Yep, I agree. Jake, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I really loved the first album. It was one of my favorite things to do is when it got kind of late at work. It was a really nice album to put on just as it got kind of dark outside and things in the store just get a little bit more slow. It just sort of like helped take the edge off of that final hour a couple of times. And I think the sound here I found to be more active. I found I think there's a sort of unfair, at least, stereotype about lots of ambient music just sort of being like slow and boring. And for me, at least, this is one of the most active ambient listens I've had since like I listened to like the Burial compilation, where it's just like you're picking up on so many little teensy ideas. I think Saoirse's like spot on with it teaches you how to listen to it as you go along. And like I really like how, I, of course, listened to it on the only way I could, which was YouTube, and just sort of there's the one holistic piece. So, like, I had to go and figure out and look at the track titles to see which ones were which. But that being said, it's a really cohesive piece. It actually reminded a bit of Fishman's Seasons, which I listened to semi-recently, and the way that it just sort of ebbs and flows in this, like, especially in the more, I guess, the darker tracks, which I also appreciate about this album. It has a strong grasp on its tone in a given song, and I feel like it's Philip Glass-ness contributes a lot to that, and I love I think it's Arcadia, or is that what it's called? Arcadia?
Yeah.
Arcadia. That song I feel like is this just really, like, it almost, like, I really, really need to listen to it with my good pair of headphones and not like my just shitty Bluetooth ones, just to get a more solid grasp on it personally. But I was sort of enamored with it. It just sort of carried itself throughout the entire duration so well. I think it can be enjoyed both, like, I think it's best enjoyed if you're doing nothing but listening to it, but I think it's also something that's perfect to listen to if, you know, you're actively doing something else, which is one of my favorite utilizations of ambient music. And I do see it as a step up from your previous work, and if I can note another small influence, it's because I guess I was looking for it just because I noticed you sampled some of Tom York's work in Suspiria on the first album, which of course I noticed that immediately. And on this one, I felt a lot of Tom York, especially solo stuff influence. I like this a considerable bit more than any of Tom York's solo albums, but that's neither here nor there. But I felt a lot of that here, and it was sort of the kind of thing I really wanted from albums like that. And yeah, I don't know. It's just a really fucking solid release, and I like pretty much everything about it.
I would just say now that all three of us have said we really like this album, another thing that everyone should know about all three of us is we are not the kind of friends who just, someone says we're working and we're just like, oh, well done, you did a thing. No, if there's flaws in it, we'll say so. Because we care about each other and want each other to improve. So we all really like this because we all really like this outside of knowing August.
I mean, this is definitely like in the upper echelons of albums I've listened to this year personally.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and like I said, I won't shy away from saying the fact that I like parts of it considerably more than I like other parts. Like I think Hiroshi, Arcadia, and Honestly are standouts. They're the best songs on the record. Like I said, I don't quite care for Bioluminescence Cumulus as much, and I like the closing track, but it doesn't quite linger with me the way that other tracks do. But
if I had problems with it, I would say that while Starlight Somewhere I enjoyed its shortness. By that point, like I said, the album trains, I'd listened to it. By that point, the album, I was in the mood for the more longer, lingering things. So when Starlight Somewhere ended, I felt like you could have taken the song. If you'd have made it a lot longer, you could have taken it more places. Which I would have really responded to. And while I love the length of the final track, I love just sitting in that, and I love the confidence to make a 10-minute long song. I feel like it's only towards the end that I really dig it. There's nothing really like the first half that's really stimulating my emotions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also want to say that I think that I've already kind of said this, but when August and his partner try their hand at the kind of darker ambient stuff, like at the center of the record, I do think that's a particular strong suit is that dark ambient atmosphere.
Agree.
When
Absolutely.
When they use lighter synths, it just it's not that it doesn't sound good. It's just that it doesn't quite stand out like as because there's a lot of like cheap ambient music, stock ambient music out there that you can get on YouTube and listen to, like lo-fi beats, whatever, and a lot of it is kind of very much light sounding like that. So it's quite refreshing when the music's a bit darker and a bit kind of grainier and a bit like more immersive in that sense. But that also reflects on a personal taste thing as well. So
absolutely, I would agree with you so much, Tyler.
It's a very good record. It's a great progression, and also I think as well there's definitely the potential to make something even better the next time as well.
Oh yeah, oh god, yeah.
I really enjoyed listening to it. I've listened to it 3 times now, and I'll still keep listening to it even though we've already done this. But so well done.
Good shit.
No, that's fantastic. Fantastic to hear. And really, I guess I just wonder if you have any questions about like I don't know, track titles, just anything really, because
I wanted to. It's not to do with track titles, but I wanted to also shout out the cover art, which I really like.
Yeah.
And it reminds me specifically. I wonder whether this is intentional, but it reminds me of the cover art of Guess.
Yeah, that was an influence I noticed kind of after the fact, but when that image was created, it was entirely separate of the album.
Yeah, because if you look at the album covers of Guess, they're like they're very, very similar to the album cover, and I like that. It's because it's an image that captures the feel of a lot of the record really nicely.
Yeah. I just want to say that August does a lot of my cover art for my music. He's done a lot of cover art for things that haven't been released yet, just because I've been too busy to finish them. But amazingly talented illustrator as well. Or else I wouldn't ask him to do things for me if I didn't think he was good at what he did.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. Well, shall we are we going to do like favorite tracks and scores, or?
I mean, why not? I can. I'm pretty sure no one's gonna be like, this is a 4. and even if you were, I'd be fine with that.
Well, it would be tonally inconsistent with what we had said at this point.
A bit dissonant.
It is. It's definitely a good album. I'll go first if you want. So I've already said my favorite tracks anyway. Hiroshi, Arcadia, and honestly, especially Arcadia, which I really love. And I will give this record a emphatic 7.5 out of 10.
So I think that means it's me next, if we're going in that order. My two favourites are Hiroshi and Honestly, and they go between Arcadia and the final one. I don't really have a least favourite. If I was to pick one, it would probably be Starlight Somewhere. And I'm going to give it a solid 8.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay. My 3
We're
favorite
skipping
tracks
Morgan and
are...
August for some reason.
Oh, for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Arcadia, Honestly, and throw a feel loop to say Cumulus. That one. I like that a lot. I would give this a fairly emphatic 8.5.
Ooh.
Nice.
Oh, that's...
All right. So August is now one of 3 contemporary releases that we covered to get an 8+.
Oh, dang.
Ooh.
You are tied with Jeff Rosenstock, August. How do you feel?
Honestly, it's an honor for me.
I enjoy them about the same. So,
They're both very good.
I am very happy that you all have enjoyed this record, because it was something that, if I may go on for a bit about the process, it was something that it initially started pretty much immediately after the first record had wrapped up, and we just had this spiral of time where we just couldn't get this kind of lightning in the bottle of like what we wanted this record to be. But then something clicked in January, and that was when the production of the last song began. And that was the song that probably took us the longest, because we just spent the better part of like 5 months just kind of piecing together this huge epic we wanted to end the record on. And what we ended up doing was, in piecing that song together, it kind of led way to inspiration for everything else on the record, and just kind of creating this whole experience. And I'm happy that it's out, and I'm excited for us to start working on the third one.
I can't wait to hear it.
Honestly,
I'm probably going to have an album coming out this year as well.
Oh yeah, gosh, that's awesome.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Tyler and I are always just
EP
like,
and an album coming
that
out,
sounds
actually, so
nice.
Yeah.
Making music. Sure would like it if I could do that.
Maybe one day I'll finish the terrible album I made when I was 16.
Hey, at least you made one.
Yeah.
I can't do that shit.
Anyway,
Morgan, you can come back.
Yeah. Can we take a short break now? Just like
I'm gonna
for, like, a
I'm
couple
gonna
minutes?
shout and just be like, Morgan! I'm gonna drive to his house and
Oh,
beat him
there he
up.
is.
There he is.
There's the boy.
There's that beautiful
I've
bitch.
been listening the whole time.
Oh, we
Don't you
should
want
have
to
talked
listen
more
to his
shit
album,
about you.
Morgan?
Yeah, really.
Don't you want to listen to his
I
album?
felt bad.
No, you didn't.
I was gonna say the expression on your face did not say that you felt bad. You're just like,
I felt
bad.
bad.
Oh my god, we've done 3 to 4 albums already. This podcast has gone so quickly.
You need not feel bad either. I have the memory of a goldfish. This is my fault.
God, if you have
Now.
Okay, so we had a recommended album last week by me.
oh boy, did we.
And I recommended Farrah Abraham's Perfume Gene. Farrah Abraham. For context, we were talking about Perfume Genius.
I just
before
quoted
that
Fight
song. Farrah Abraham's My Teenage Dream ended. I just needed to let that die because there was no picking that back up.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Anyways, I recommended this album, and I made some bold statements that I said it was a genre-defining album, and I think my goal, and I think I'm going to double down on that. I'm going to say this is a very important album to the course of music of the.
I'm gonna back you up,
2010s.
bitch.
Nice. And really, the context is this comes from a woman named Farrah Abraham, who was born in Omaha, Nebraska, raised in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Very, very much places just in the middle of the country, and all of a sudden she was picked up by this show, 16 and pregnant when she had a child. When she had a child at the age of 16, suddenly she's rocketed into this world of stardom in front of millions of people, and then the father of her child ends up dying in the middle of all of this, and she is just left to pick up what's left of her life after she's been jetted straight into the public eye and now has to deal with that. And as a result, she ended up writing a book also called My Teenage Dream Ended. So she beat Logic to the punch with making a soundtrack album to a book, and that's
supermarket energy.
yes.
Man, he can't even be original in his most spectacular of failures, can he?
No, you can't.
Tell you what, I like, no matter what I say about this album, just know I like it more than any Logic album.
Co-signed.
Yeah.
All right, so that is the contextual point from which this album emanates. And now, because a large number of the panel is going to be negative about this album,
That's presumptuous of you. We don't know. You might be
No, we do.
I would bet my ass.
I think it's pretty sumptuous, Tyler.
So I would like you all to
Well done.
speak now.
You'll forever hold your peace.
Appeal to me.
I'm holding the piece, all right.
I
I
see
All
what
right,
you did there. That's a reference to the lyrics on the album.
I did. I referenced the lyrics. Thank you for.
I knew
catching
you were
that.
gonna do that, and I knew I wasn't going to catch on to it because I wouldn't remember lyrics that aren't "we're fighting not."
That's
So
No.
I feel like I'll probably be the most in the middle person here, so it's only fitting that I go first. Is that Tyler and August in a couple of months ago?
I know the
couple
exact
months ago.
date actually, February 13th. I know that.
Why the
because
fuck do you know that?
I know that because that was the day before the new Tame Impala album was going to be released, and I sent that to you as like kind of something to pass the time before that would have its midnight release.
Okay, that is correct. That is the exact circumstance under which I heard this album. I was also really fucking drunk, which is probably what allowed me to go into this. And then Tyler's emphatic insistence that I do it
yes.
because he was just like, yeah, you have to do this. And I was just like, I do? And then I looked
Shut
up, I
up.
was just like, I looked up what the album was, and I was just like, oh my god, I remember this girl. My mom used to watch this show back when we lived at our old house and had cable. Oh my god.
Say hi to your mum for me, by the way.
I will. And so I just threw on this album with no context for what it was other than the teen mom girl made it, and then I listened to it, and I think the operative word here for the whole album, sonically and tacky. I think I would best describe it as tacky. You hear this, and I am catapulted to, again, I don't remember the year under which this was released, but at least musically speaking, I am, okay, this is perfect, because I was going to say I am catapulted right into 2012, right when things like dubstep was being, and like electronic dance music was not like, it wasn't a thing that was on the fringe genre, it was sort of becoming this like overriding genre thing. Like when I listen to this, I think of like, I think the most telling comparison I can make here is to the Chainsmokers song Selfie.
That's in my notes.
Man, we are on the same wavelength. Truly.
It's in my notes for the song Caught in the Act. This is Selfie by the Chainsmokers.
It is an album that, and yet, I will not in any way disagree with August and Tyler in saying that I do not see how this is an album that paved the way for a distinct genre and sound to evolve from it. Because I listened to this, and the first thing I thought of is I was just like, this sounds like Charlie XCX.
The thing is, Jake, I said earlier that we would later find out why reading YouTube comments is a bad idea, and that's because I did for this album. So I know exactly what people mean when they say this is a trailblazer for a type of music, and they're talking about like Crystal Castles, people like that, and those are the people they mentioned in those comments. And
hyperpop.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, it's interesting that as we talk about this, I have a book I've been reading next to me. It's this.
Oh Jesus!
It's called White Trash: the 400-year untold history of class in America, and it basically argues that
a roast of me and Morgan.
It basically argues that the cultural perception of working class white people as somehow lesser, and their culture being lesser, is founded in racist ideas about black people. And it argues it very well. So I just wanted to say that I understand that a lot of people are going to dunk on Farrah Abraham, and really, I don't actually know what race she is. I don't really care. It doesn't affect my point. But a lot of people are going to look at a lot of the people in things like 16 and Pregnancy Mum, all that shit, and be like, point and laugh at the poor white trash. And I don't want to do that. No. But I hate this album with every fibre of my being. And I understand what it's about, and it's sad, and that sadness is sincerely expressed, and sincerely expressed well in one song, and one song alone, called Searching for Closure, I think.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring that song up. I knew that. I wrote down Saoirse is going to talk about Searching for Closure.
That's the one song, yeah. But the thing is it's like, when that kind of Chainsmokers thing was getting big, I fucking hated it. And it's like I said when we talked about the last couple of songs on the Charlie album, it's just a sound I'm allergic to. Probably because of trauma I suffered in teen discos.
And this is more aggressively that and less well implemented than Charlie, so your opinion is well founded.
Thank you. But like for the song Caught in the Act, aside from the Selfie note, my one note is pain in big capital letters. For the song Unplanned Parenthood, my note is no, please no. And for my song Without This Ring, it sounds like a soap opera score. The thing is, when we talk about albums like the Black Dresses album, Peaceful as Hell, and how it's doing things to do with distortion of pop music, like a perversion, a subversion of pop music, I look at this album and I feel like this is a sincere attempt at emotion, but the only tools she has to build it with the wrong tools. She's trying to build a house with a cucumber, and the cucumber is EDM. And it's like when we talk about the Black Dresses album, it's like these are people who understand what they're doing, and I know that because of the ironic layers of detachment that album has. The album is constantly letting you know exactly what it's doing with these sounds, and this is like I've just pulled a fish out of the ocean on my boat, and it's sitting there just flapping about on my deck, and I don't have the heart to kill it.
I just want to.
God.
I want to. Actually, no. I should wait till you're finished before I.
No, I'm finished. That was it.
Okay, well, I just want to build on what you're saying because for the record, I'm not sure like what specific. I'm not sure what specific sort of vibe I give off with regard to my feelings about this album, but I don't think it's a great album. I never have. And I think that a lot of what is most interesting about it is more contextual than sonic. And I also think not just contextual, but conceptual as well. It's a tough album to actually talk about it because you can't really analyze it in the same way as you analyze another record. But at the same time, in a defense of it, you don't want to come across as though you're dismissing the importance of whether the music sounds good, because that is important. It's just that the whole approach to criticizing this record is short-sighted if it relies too much on an analysis of what the music sounds like, because that, while it is important, is not is a lot of what makes the record interesting has not a lot to do with that, really. Some to do with that, I suppose. Although let's talk about it contextually in terms of like music and sonics. There is a lot of stuff.
I wonder if you're about to make the outlandish comparison that I just thought of.
Well, I've got a lot of comparisons in my notes, and we'll get to each of them. The obvious one is that's already been mentioned is Crystal Castles, and like the thing is, this album, and I'm going to make the case that this album has influenced a number of artists, and I know August is going to make that case as well. But Crystal Castles' influence and most influential music came before this album, so this is an example of their influence, not of this album's influence. This album takes a lot from the toolkit of Crystal Castles, particularly on the closing track, which sounds exactly like a Crystal Castles first album song from 2008. Yeah, and they're a beloved act. They're obviously mired in controversy now because the lead guy behind Crystal Castles is a rapist. But putting all that aside, there is also
we're going to need a lot of content warnings at the beginning of this podcast.
There was another member of Crystal Castles who unfortunately was the victim of the other members' sexual abuse, Alice Glass. It's a nasty story. Basically, the main guy in Crystal Castles, Ethan Cass, sexually and emotionally abused the band's singer and co-songwriter Alice Glass for a number of years, during which they all made their most beloved and influential material. Basically, she exited the band after a certain point and is now trying to carve out a solo career. And she was always like the most interesting part of the band anyway. But that's a big digression because it has very little to do with this album, apart from one comparison.
Alex, can I get a yikes for 200?
Anyway. But yeah, that's the kind of sonic niche that they kind of carved out is very much the initial impact of that is very much felt here. But anyway, it's very difficult for me to know how to structure this analysis that I have because my notes are very disjointed. But I'm sure that in reading them, a through line will emerge. This is very clearly an album of about grieving. It's about being in a state of emotional turmoil and not knowing how to deal with that, and wanting to express that, but not having the means to express that. And also, in expressing that, it's fascinating in the way that it kind of incorporates and juxtaposes those raw expressions with bizarre sounds and sounds that were popular at the time, like these kind of dubsteppy things, and it takes these weird kind of kitschy aesthetics from music that was never very good and has always kind of sounded terrible, but in juxtaposing that with really kind of painful and awkward and heartrending forthrightness about grieving, it creates this weird transfixing artifact, basically.
You are right. I just hated it. I'm sorry.
No,
You're correct.
like, that's totally valid. Like, I'm not here to say that if you hated it, if knowing that you hated it, you didn't get it, or you didn't get it, or you missed it, or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to argue. I'm just trying to make the case
understand
for why I find it fascinating.
And I understand that is what people see in it, but for me, it's like if it was playing with those sounds in a way, at least where I felt like the lyrics weren't just someone reading her diary out loud to me, but it had some kind of like poetry to it, or
but
she was on the beat.
This is the thing, though. What makes it fascinating is that it's not doing any of these things intentionally. It just is the effect that has happened. Because, like, all these artists that go for this kind of thing, it's a very conscious attempt at subversion, and it's obviously best when it's done well and it's got an artistic vision, and we can resonate with it and see the artistic vision and admire the craft. But what makes this record fascinating, and look, I'm saying fascinating, not great. What makes it fascinating is the fact that it has this weird quality that we would associate with sort of postmodern art. That's entirely unintentional.
You're entirely correct. Entirely correct.
And I think that's fascinating. And some of this is reminiscent of like Shushu in a way, although that's obviously another group that does.
That's another one they threw about in the comments on YouTube. Was it's the Shushu record?
Well, yeah, and I'm not trying to, because it can be a lazy comparison, but what I mean by that is that it operates in a similar way to their music, a kind of raw, I mean, not all of their music, but specifically their most popular music, which is their early stuff, kind of raw, bleeding expression of grief that kind of has an almost disregard for what conventionally sounds good. The difference is that with this record, the instrumentals, the difference is with Shushu stuff, the instrumentals are less cheap, they're not stock, the lyrics are more elliptical and directly attempting to be subversive poetry, though they're no less personal either. Although the earnest delivery and disregard for conventional musical tone means the records, I don't think, are that far away from each other. A closer comparison might be Black Dresses, of all things, but again, that's another example of a group like Shushu where the aesthetics, they're very self-aware and conscious in the aesthetics that they adopt and subvert. So this just makes like analyzing the reference points for the record sound difficult, because it seems like none of it's being done intentionally, and we don't really know what was going. Like, there is an interview with the producer of this record that I'm sure August will probably mention. I don't remember a lot of the detail, but my general impression from the interview was not that the producer was attempting to create some kind of subversive masterpiece, just that he had limited materials, a limited amount of time, and a singer who was not cooperative in the typical sense that a singer would be when
that her vocals
commissioning
were good.
someone. Yeah, exactly. So, but this is the kind of thing that, and this is the kind of record that even if it didn't influence them directly, through the weird internet osmosis that happens, it's kind of filtered into the style of that, what I've kind of talked about earlier, is that kind of post-ironic, ultra-sincere emo pop of PC music artists like Hannah Diamond and, of course, Charlie XCX. And I think you can definitely see the roots of something like How I'm Feeling Now in this record. I genuinely think that.
Right. I can see that, absolutely.
No, that's actually a great point you mentioned, because whereas for me at least, How I'm Feeling Now is a record that feels like it is almost coming from a place of like pompous, I guess would be a word to use, in that it is a woman who is clearly very well off, complaining about a kind of, in some songs at least, having a physical and metaphorical separation from her boyfriend, And on this album, I feel it is a very genuine expression of separation.
Oh, totally. Like, yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
That's the thing that makes the record so affecting is that the emotions, unlike in a lot of the music it most directly influenced, more like directly, like less recently, before it became like weaved back from ironic to being sincere, was that a lot of the music it influenced was kind of either satirizing or just performatively gesturing towards emotions like this, or like I'm thinking of a lot of the early PC music stuff, but whereas here it's very genuine, like it's a genuine outpouring of grief. And I'm not trying to make the argument either that genuine grief felt through music makes it good, but it gives it an emotional resonance to me that I can't deny. And I have got quite a few more things to say, and I'll try and get through them all so that other people can have a turn. I do think that Farrah's lyrics here, I mean, the opening line of this record, whether intentional or not, kind of like is a beautiful summary. It's kind of a beautiful summary of the record, because the opening line is, "I can only put so much into a song." And you can interpret that in any number of ways.
Jesus.
Because evidently she's referring to her inability to fully communicate how she's feeling through music, but obviously it speaks to the limitations of her musical ability as well. Farrah's lyrics are surprisingly evocative at points. I genuinely think that, even if she overdoes it and she kind of tends to dull any moments of nuance with another terrible line, but when it hits, it really does hit. I think that I actually genuinely like I genuinely like a lot of songs on this record, I won't lie. I think the opening track has a genuinely sad instrumental that's not a million miles away from what we're seeing in newer waves of emo filtered trap music. The artists like Lil Uzi Vert and that kind of scene it's very similar kind of aesthetic here, and it's digitized sadness of artists like them, and artists like, I think, again, Black Dresses is not an unfair comparison on this track. But once you adjust to its off-kilter and frequently musical presentation, it actually becomes, for me anyway, a strangely beguiling and affecting record. And not quite as weird either, or off-putting as it initially seemed the first time I listened to it. Like, having listened to this many times now, like, obviously its incompetencies are clear, but it doesn't sound quite as bizarre and disjointed and off-kilter as it did initially. Like, it sounds fairly basic, like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just, there's more structure here than I think maybe gets credit. The production is very cheap and straightforward. The beats sound stock and they're frequently very cheesy, but it does work, I think, to reinforce a kind of upsetting emotional vulnerability that is imbued in a lot of her vocal performances here as well. Now, we can't go without talking about the way these vocals were recorded.
I'm so excited.
For those of you who don't know, Farrah recorded these vocals at her own insistence, I believe, without the backing track. So I believe she had heard the songs. I believe she had heard the instrumentals, but she was not recording her vocals while listening to them. That's not a good way to make music. I don't need to tell you that.
No, I don't suppose you do.
No, it's not. No, and I'm not going to attempt to defend that as a conscious artistic decision, because it was not. It was not like, I don't believe that it was a conscious artistic decision. Although then again, maybe I'm selling Farrah short in that regard. I don't know. Just the impression I get is that it's not like consciously artistic. It's just that Farrah wanted to get the vocals recorded really quickly, and I don't know. She didn't have her headphones or whatever, or the beats weren't ready or something. Or it was just rushed, basically. But there is still a weird quality to some of the vocal performances, a weird quality to the presence of these vocals on certain tracks that is kind of haunting. I'm not gonna lie.
No, that's the thing. That's exactly the thing. That once in like a couple once in a couple verses, she will sing a lyric or something that just hits so perfectly with an instrumental.
Yeah, I've written a
backing.
few down as well, when that I'll get to shortly.
Oh yeah.
Like lyrically, it's kind of like scattered thoughts in a diary entry at some points, although a lot of the time it also just feels like pure stream of consciousness. I think obviously the personal sentiments that she expresses here are not solely performative. We know the tragic backstory that August has touched on, and the kind of pathos I think is particularly clear in the opening track, as well as Without This Ring, which I think has these really nice emotive layered pianos that do sound cheap, but I do like them, I'm not going to lie. There are also, and I'm going to get the most positive at this next part, there are also just genuinely songs here that I think sound great and are very affecting. I want to shout out Liar Liar, for which the vocal style weirdly suits the track. I think this is the one instance where the vocal style suits the track the most. It seems less disjointed than it does on other parts of the record. Searching for Closure as well is a similar sounding track that has a very similar effect, and it's more emotive for how directly it is about her boyfriend's death. And I don't know, like when she says things like, "You're in my heart, my mind, my thoughts, my prayers, I'm holding back my tears, my tongue, this kills me." It's very it's straightforward, it's without pretense, it's pure, direct emotion, and I enjoy that more than I enjoy someone who can't write fumbling to create some poetry and just being terribly pretentious. Like, I enjoy the directness of the way she's addressing her feelings here, and it's legitimately powerful when she gets to the point where she's saying, "I love you, we're finally at peace, no one will get between us anymore." I just genuinely, that makes me so sad, and I get really emotional at that point.
I mean, I would like those moments and those lines because, you read them outside of that, they are good, and affecting, but in the context of how they sound, I just can't take it seriously. I don't know what to say.
No, it's fine. Look, you don't have to defend yourself, Saoirse. I think your points and your perspective are obviously totally fair. I've been racking with the sound of the vocals on this record for months. I've been trying to figure out what exactly it is about them that I find so transfixing. And I think it's kind of like they have this weird feeling of being like AI, some kind of robot that's learning emotion or something. Like, it has this weird inhuman feel. Like they sound,
I thought the exact same thing.
They sound
inhuman. I did too.
And again, not suggesting that's intentional, but I just find it fascinating to listen to. And then there's this moment on the album where, I don't want to not give Farrah her due, because it's entirely possible that she was intending some satire here. But the track "The Sunshine State," genuinely sounds like a pop culture parody. The kind of thing that there's a specific artist in the PC music scene called GFOTY, Girlfriend of the Year. And she's one of the more out there extreme artists in that scene, who I actually have mixed feelings on, because a lot of her satire is really over the top and kind of off-putting. But it's very similar to what Farrah does on this track. Even though this track is less polished and just quite noisy and abrasive. But I think this is one instance where the cheapness of the production of the record works well, because it actually heightens the satire of the song immensely, I think. I would agree. I quite enjoy how that works on that song, because it's a ridiculous song. It's just ridiculous.
But are my initials appeal to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's literally the lyric.
That's the kind of shit that artists like GFOTY and Hannah Diamond and lots of PC music artists were doing in 2017, 2018, and the difference was they just had better production, but it was the same thing. So I find that interesting, and I think that it's good. The closing track, I actually quite like the closing track a lot. Like I said, it sounds like Crystal Castles. I like it a lot because I like Crystal Castles music. I listened to their music growing up as it came out, so that again is part of the reason why I'm so it's so easy for me to get into the sound of these kinds of records because it's just a part of my upbringing. But yeah, like I think, I mean, I've probably said way too much already. But one other like instrumental comparison I want to bring up is that the song "On My Own" sounds like Aphex Twin. That's all.
All right.
It has a beat that sounds very much like, or like
I
a
was
melody that sounds
expecting
so
you to-
much like an Aphex Twin melody. But
I was
anyway,
expecting the comparison of a Ryuichi Sakamoto type beat.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but possibly.
No, but
Um,
no, definitely not like to the extreme of quality.
Yeah.
But
But like, yeah, I guess just to like summarize real quickly, it's just it kind of is at the point where I've listened to this record many times over a long period of time, and it's kind of at the point where what's intentional, it doesn't really matter to me in the case of this record anymore. It's just about the weird beguiling effect that it has, and like I said, ever since I thought about ever since I had that thought of that like comparison with the vocals to AI, like I haven't been able to get that out of my head every time I listen to them now, and it just makes it kind of weirdly sad and beautiful and twisted, and I like admire the effect that this record has on me for something that shouldn't work on any conceivable level, but just kind of does.
And it's been fascinating to hear you talk about it. Like, absolutely, really interesting and compelling.
Like, I'm not trying to. I don't want to
Really.
come across as if I'm kind of trying to defend an ironic enjoyment of the album or anything. Like,
You're
or that
not, like,
No.
honestly.
or that
I
I'm
think
kind of
you're.
standing up for it for the sake of like, like, because it's one of these things where a lot of people with records like this do kind of jump on the wave because like it seems like such a people hate certain people think it's so trash that other people think, well, I'm going to be different and it's going to be really fun because I'm going to like this and make other people mad with how much I like it. Like there's a performative liking to this kind of
Vulgar
stuff.
auteurism.
Yeah,
type
exactly.
beat.
That's
Exactly.
in my notes. That
And I
this
don't
is
wanna-
vulgar auteurism.
I don't want to come across as if I'm defending it with that perspective because I'm not. I just find it fascinating and I genuinely enjoy listening to it now.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
fair
I
enough.
think that is a totally like fair thing. And you know, and in that same vein, I guess, I suppose I am in two school of thoughts about this album.
Oh, hang on, just real quick. Sorry, Jake, just real quick. I do want to say, I hate the songs "Caught in the Act" and "Unplanned Parenthood." Like, I was so focused on saying stuff that I like, I didn't forget to mention that I do hate those songs.
Again,
so
Caught
much.
in the Act. My one note is pain.
Yeah, and "Unplanned
It's-
Parenthood" is even worse.
And pleasant.
Anyway,
yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
I think on one hand, the content-wise, I hate that I'm doing this, but this is the thing I've come to be known for, I suppose. Thematically and content-wise, the album that is most comparable to this
Bracing myself.
is Phil Elverum's A Crow Looked at Me. Except, obviously,
I was not expecting that.
No, that was
I'm glad.
left field.
It is that tangible, real, actual, uncomfortable grief filtered through the hyperpop Charlie XCX sound. And in a weird way, I do not disagree with Tyler's assertion that it is like good, bad. I toss those words aside. It is transfixing. In many instances, it very much is. And I think, and also in terms of the lyrics and a lot of their intentional clunkiness, I also think of the Mount Erie album Lost Wisdom Part 2, especially on songs like When I Walk into the Museum, and how there are so many lyrics that intentionally just kind of go off the beat, that just don't feel like they are adhering to the song structure, and they are meant to be paid attention to more because of that, and the clumsiness sort of adds to the vibe. And like Tyler said, I'm not concerned about intentionality, because as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't matter, most of the time at least. And I will say that Farrah does occasionally effectively translate her emotions into something that feels representative of said emotions. There are singular lyrics that I latch onto of being like, Jesus, this is difficult to process. And what I'm going to say also, I don't want to be like Tyler and say like I'm trying to defend this ironically or anything. My thoughts on the album are decidedly negative. That being said, this album is a whole lot more palatable and interesting if you don't look at it as music,
Excuse me?
just
Yeah, I see where you're
purely
going.
as an artistic expression of someone's feelings. I understand and relate to taking very personal trauma and trying to effectively relay that through your very, very limited artistic means, as someone who very much did exactly that with his first self-published novel, a novel that is ridden with structural problems, typos, and I'm sure 1,000 other problems with my prose and all of these things that you could fairly level at it. But like that project, I feel like there is a undeniable amount of emotional honesty there that would be unfair to overlook. It is really more, and I also relate to the idea of not having the proper tools to express these things. Like you only have so much to work with, and like even if you were an experienced artist, if you don't have the right tools, you are not going to effectively be able to create what you're going to create. And in that respect, her inability to translate this with her limited tools, it adds to this strange desperation that the album has. That like she, and even then it feels more effective in retrospect, I find, because you feel like I'll listen to something like the new Charlie album and I feel like it is these sonic ideas fully realized, and I go back and this is an album that decidedly is not these ideas fully realized, and it adds to the tragedy of the situation that much more, of somebody who is compelled to make this piece of art through something horrible that happened to her, through something like unspeakably awful and terrible in a very difficult time in your life when she was obviously very inexperienced and vulnerable, and just feeling compelled to do that and having to make it and having the resolve to finish it is something I genuinely admire. And as an art piece purely, I find value in it. But if you judge it as music, which we decidedly are on a podcast about music, it is a spectacular failure in so many ways. It still adds to the tragedy, but good God, it also feels uncomfortable in the respect that it feels like Farrah is just so mishandling these very sensitive topics that it becomes uncomfortable in a way that's not really representative of her. It's more just like, oh God, I really feel like this needed to be handled with more taste. And that is also, could be argued, adds to the artistic merit of the album.
I was just going to interrupt
but-
briefly to say that I do think that the musical elements of the record are integral to the reason that I like it, because they're integral to the
I agree
aesthetics of the record,
completely.
like, even if they're
Yeah,
objectively not
the
good.
way I'd compare it is, it's like, I'm sure Tommy Wiseau was saying something really genuine with The Room, but I still fucking hate that movie. And then I watched something like The Greasy Strangler, which uses the aesthetic of bad movies, bad acting, bad shooting, whatever in that movie. But I love that movie because, like, I don't know, like, it's not to do with intentionality to me. It's more to do with, like, this album and The Room don't work because they are authentically expressed things done badly. But the Black Dresses one and the Greasy Strangler are co-opting those aesthetics and doing it with, they know what they're doing, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree.
Counterpoint. and again, I really sound like I'm more in August and Tyler's camp of positivity when I'm, again, decidedly not. I will say, the thing that separates something like this from The Room, in my opinion, which, again, this is very subjective and you cannot properly evaluate these things because there's no way to delve inside these people's heads and know exactly what they're thinking, but I feel like Farrah's expression here is inherently more honest than Tommy's. Tommy Wiseau in The Room is being dishonest with himself because he is portraying a situation that is like, you can tell, at least, like, if you read The Disaster Artist, at least, that Tommy is somebody who inherently has this worldview that allows him to think and perceive this situation as being The Room. Whereas Farrah is not trying to tell a story, she is literally just saying what happened.
No, you are objectively correct about that, but it was the closest parallel I could think of.
I understand. I'm just saying there is a differentiation between the levels of bad that we're talking about here.
No, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
No, I mean, the key difference there being that Tommy Wiseau was and still is delusional.
Yes.
And, regardless of whatever you want to say about The Room, he is not on the same wavelength as everybody else. You can,
that's true.
Yeah, and this is just such a decidedly more honest album than The Room is.
Absolutely.
Just to back Jake's points up. Although I do completely understand the point of comparison made in the first place.
Thank you. Anyway, I don't feel like I've heard Morgan talk a bunch.
Yeah, Morgan, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, my thoughts altogether will be very brief because I only listened to this once. It's all I could bring myself to listen to.
Understandable.
I think viewing this through any lens of irony is doing it a disservice because these are very real, genuine human emotions explored on this album. And as such, I think the biggest term that I would ascribe to this is ill-advised. This was poor from conception, and if anyone was in their right mind during the process of this, it would have been shelved. Because I don't think it was a good idea to release this. It's deeply off-putting in its honesty, but what makes that honesty off-putting is the cavalcade of Casio keyboard presets surrounding it. And to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't find this album all that sort of, weird or anything. It just sounds like the worst 50 Cent version of whatever was on the radio in 2012. I don't find the music notable at all on either side of the spectrum. I just think it's mildly annoying and I want to be listening to something else. It's not new to me.
I agree completely.
It's just that filtered through the lens of this real life tragedy, I agree, is fascinating because of the inherent kind of tonal dissonance there, but it makes me deeply uncomfortable and it seems wildly inadvised, and I don't enjoy a single aspect of the record.
Well, I mean, I like your perspective, and I think it's totally fair. But I mean, the thing to remember is that this was a conscious decision by Farrah to express these emotions and in the form. Like, no one said you have to make this record about your experience.
I'm aware of that, and that's why I decided to assign the term ill-advised.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't like implying that Farrah had some kind of lack of agency in the direction of her record.
No.
This is not like MTV Unplugged Lauryn Hill. Like,
oh God,
no.
Lack of.
I'm sure we will cover that album someday.
Must we?
Will we?
Must we?
I hope not.
Someday.
Can we say anything that Todd in the Shadows didn't?
No.
That's a very good
honestly.
point, actually.
Okay, so may I get into my...
Please.
There you go.
Yeah.
my thoughts, because in the year around the year 1995 was when the band Nirvana was at its peak of popularity. And I'm going somewhere with this because
I know. I'm really curious to see
Nirvana's
where.
frontman.
What year did you say that was?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, that was a bit late. There,
Oh wait, no, you're right.
Might
You're
want
right.
Yeah, I was
bit late
91.
for a couple reasons.
91 was
No,
peak.
I see. I am going off more an estimation because of a certain release date, which I will get to now. But back when Kurt Cobain was alive and not dead,
Yes,
he was
that's
once
what alive
seen,
means.
He was once seen wearing a shirt promoting an underground artist from Chicago, Illinois, known as Wesley Willis. Wesley Willis.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Oh,
already.
yes. Wesley Willis made music that was almost entirely on kind of MIDI presets on his piano. And he would scream his heart out, and it is where that famous Rock and Roll McDonald's song.
Yeah, I was going to send that to the group chat.
What?
Hang on.
Yes.
I'm not going to interrupt you, but I am. But I'm not going to talk over you, but I am. But I've got to send that song to the group chat, and after we finish recording, before we end the call, but after we finish recording, I need to get Jake and Morgan and Saoirse to listen to that and give us their real-time reactions to it.
Yes, we need this.
Anyway,
Anyway,
continue.
Somebody will have to throw up a screen share.
Wesley Willis was a man who was deeply, he grew up with a very kind of messed up life, to put it in a word without getting into the graphic detail. And he made these songs that were kind of emotional exorcisms of the individual moments in his life. And that is probably best represented by songs of his like Thrown Out of Church, or let's see, I'm going to find the name of another one that's particularly notable. Oh boy, kind of Thrown Out of Church, Outburst, Chronic Schizophrenia. This man came from this place of just needing to express these things that were so deeply personal and raw and unfiltered. And I feel that Farrah Abraham, the appeal of this, of My Teenage Dream Ended, is that it is coming from a very similar place to Wesley Willis, of just having this idea she needs to express and get out.
Daniel Johnston as well, I think.
Yes, that's another great one.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Daniel Johnson so much.
Okay.
I don't know. Just throwing that out there. Daniel Johnson's amazing. Go listen to his stuff. He's great.
What I'm going to say is the reason I find Farrah's My Teenage Dream Ended to almost be something I go from liking to kind of loving, unlike a given Wesley Willis song, is that she is so focused on this emotional standpoint she's trying to deliver. And as we've mentioned, that can come off as a bit kind of disturbing or ill-advised, but where I feel the thing is, you also have to make that same exception for artists like Willis or Johnston, because it comes from not the exact same place, but definitely a similar place of this artistic expression, and the method she went to express this is very interesting. I find that her choices, as Tyler mentioned, for instrumentals, while cheesy, are really predictive. And I think more than anything, despite all of the cheesiness and the auto-tune, what she says to me just, it shines through perfectly. I feel I do not miss a thing from her. when she is delivering a song. It's granted, there are bad songs on this album, like the ones Tyler mentioned are a little bad, yeah. But what she is going for as a whole is just this.
I guess that's August then. We figured
She,
that out.
what she's going for as a whole is this really emotional project, and I just think I don't see it as like an AI kind of learning human emotions. I think of it as a human using an AI to try and mask their emotions is how I feel about this record in a statement.
I like that. And I think the Wesley Willis comparison is so spot on that I am fucking annoyed that I didn't think of it first. Because that is clearly the closest comparison to what this actually
Like,
sounds
it's
like.
so close, it's wild, honestly.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
But yeah, I think and I think that is the core, just your interpretation of what she is saying is the core of whether you enjoy this album or not. Because if you find what she is saying to be, because everyone, I think, will say that this is a sincere effort.
Yeah.
But whether you read that effort as ill-conceived or as like a fascinating exploration of Abraham's character is entirely going to determine and sway your opinion on this record. And yeah, that's
I
not
see.
the
I struggle to explain like why I like this but don't love it. Like I feel like from what the description I've given, I should love this record, and I feel like I haven't given a good enough reason for why I like but don't love it. But yeah, like I do honestly feel similarly about the music of artists like Wesley Willis though. Like I don't love that either. I appreciate certain elements of the way of the expression and the way that the expression and the instrumental contrast or juxtapose with each other, but it's almost always more of a it's not like I get a deep resonance out of that. It's more just like I think that's neat, like that's interesting, that's neat, but not like that's it doesn't quite get to the level where I think this is an actually provocative, interesting. I said interesting, but it's not like I get to the point where I think this is a challenging work of art. I just think that this is a bizarre thing that was created entirely accidentally, that has an ephemeral, strange quality that I value because of its uniqueness, but that I can't quite like connect with fully, apart from the occasional moment of genuine pathos.
That's not far from how I feel about it, really.
The thing is, I think, I was going to mention this after, of course, you finished, but I think that is precisely where we differ, because I find myself genuinely able to just latch on to Abraham as an individual.
Yeah.
With this record.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing is, like, there are records that I have deep connections to and that I deeply value and I think are excellent, and are also artifacts that represent something I find interesting. Whereas this record is just the artifact without the rest of it. Like, I think it's an artifact of an interesting kind of expression, but I don't think it's a genuinely good record. Like, I'm going to give it a positive score because weighing everything up, I feel that that's what the record deserves. But it's not like, it's good more as an artifact for what it represents rather than like as a reflection of quality.
Honestly, Tyler, I think what you're saying too is that, like, when you discover something like this, when you're like a piece of art specifically like this, you don't have to have a superlative reaction. Like, it's understandable if you do, obviously, but like if you encounter something like this, I think it's okay to evaluate it in more just sort of not like middling, but just more substantive terms where you just sort of meet it at its own level and decide to like, oh, it's not this, it's actually this instead, but it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be the worst record ever. It could be to you. It doesn't have to be the best thing ever. It can also just be something you evaluate on a more fair scale.
But it also kind of reminds
I
me,
like your perspective more than like mine personally.
it also kind of reminds me of like art that's purely conceptual as well, like modern art that's like solely conceptual. Like I can't really think of examples, but like one that kind of leaps to mind is like Piano Burning on the Clipping album, for example. Like that's not a piece that I enjoy listening to, but I think it's subjectively good because I think the concept is really fascinating and valuable. And the fact that it's 18 minutes and I don't listen to it ever doesn't really detract from it in any way, because I don't think the point is whether it's pleasant to listen to or whether you enjoy listening to the 18 minutes. Is whether you appreciate the concept, value the concept or not. And that's like where some people fall off with conceptual art, is that they can't get on board with the notion that the concept is key, whereas I kind of can. And that's, I think, why I appreciate this record, because conceptually I think it's really fascinating, even if it's not enjoyable to listen to.
I feel like this record has us thinking about what makes music good.
Yeah.
Like at a completely wholly encompassing level, we are starting to define what music is to us.
We are reverse engineering the entire concept of art.
This is a profound development in this episode alone. Like,
No, there's.
Yeah, and on a level, that makes, I think, talking about this album entirely worth doing.
Oh, absolutely.
for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Even if
this
it's
is one of the
a
most fascinating
stinking-
experiences we've ever had.
Even if it's a stinking piece of shit that's as synthetic as its author's cheekbones.
Ow.
Holy shit.
Shots fired. All right, summaries then. Let's shall we do ratings and favorite tracks and etc.
Yeah,
Let's go for it.
All right.
Where do we start?
We'll just do
Let's go in normal order.
normal order. Okay.
No order? Okay. Yeah, honestly, I think this album, regardless of what I think about it, because honestly, I don't even really think I know, but regardless, this is an emphatic recommendation for me. Because if you listen to this entire album, I feel like you will come away with a better understanding of how you look at art. And I mean that with my whole chest, and I mean it sincerely. I mean, whether you come away thinking it's the worst thing ever, whether you think it is a divine revelation of artistic purity, whether you come out not knowing what to think at all, I think this will, in a way, help you understand why you look at things the way that you do, in a sense, if you think about it and really critically process it. And it also might help you understand how other people think about things. That being said, I find the album to be a deeply uncomfortable, abrasive listen that I don't particularly enjoy at all. And
See, that's the difference
I'd
between
say
you and me, Jake. I don't use the terms abrasive and uncomfortable as negative qualifiers.
Well, I don't either. We listen to
just kidding.
shit like Swans in our free time frequently. So
I was
when I
just
say
playing with you, Jake.
abrasive, no, I know. I'm just saying, when I say it is abrasive, I mean, I do not necessarily mean it is viscerally uncomfortable to listen to. I mean, it is abrasive in a way that I feel like the things that are doing the abrasing are like my emotions being scraped against each other and my logic just being shredded against my own skin, and it feels bad in my brain waves.
It defeats your critical faculties, you know?
Yes, my favorite tracks, at least the tracks that I find to be the most interesting, are Liar Liar, Derek's Visitation, and On My Own.
What is
Least
Derek's
favorite?
Visitation?
What the fuck?
You don't have that version?
No.
What? No,
No,
what
it's-
is
What are you
On,
talking about?
on Amazon Music, there is a seventh
it's-
track entitled Derek's Visitation.
Oh, what?
That's
I
a
need to hear
different
this.
version.
I
What?
need
Well,
to hear this.
Okay, so the
I
one,
was
the
surprised
version.
no one brought it up.
Okay, so the version that you listen to is, both of these versions are on Spotify. The original 2012 release
shit.
of this was just my teenage dream ended. There were 10 tracks at 27 minutes long. Derek's Visitation is not on this version.
Oh no, hang on. It's already on the album. It's just got a different title, I think. Because I'm listening to it now, and it's the same as another song, and I can't think which one it is.
Okay, so
I think it's just Searching for Closure, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
huh.
this is
be.
weird.
Yeah, it is.
'Cause-
It is because her boyfriend's
dang.
name was Derek, and Searching for Closure
Yeah.
is about his death.
Well, then,
Oh, okay.
Searching for Closure is my final one.
Can I just talk about this for a second? This
Yes,
is so
yes.
weird. Because 4 years after the fact, she released a version with the same album cover, but it's titled My Teenage Dream Ended, MY capitalized. That's the only difference between the title and presentation of the album. Otherwise, it is 2 tracks shorter with, hang on, let me look here. Searching for Closure and On My Own being removed and replaced with Derek's Visitation and a song called Pregnant.
I mean, I find that an interesting piece of conceptual art, you know?
It's also about 5 minutes shorter,
Interesting.
and I don't know what the differences are,
No,
but
I
they
have
were
to look
released.
into that. I have not heard.
No,
of
I
these
have to look
different
into this
versions.
now.
Like, I know that the first thing August is going to do once he's free is listen to that version.
You know it is. I'm going to.
Oh, my least favorite track, I guess, is With This Ring, I guess. And I give this a light 4 out of 10.
Okay.
Fair enough.
This album is abrasive, and it is. I've already made that joke. You get my point. But I feel it is so concise, so emotionally impactful, and it is something that makes you so metacognitive of what you
Big brain
find.
energy.
Metacognitive.
This man just
Holy
said
fuck.
metacognitive.
Yeah. It
This
makes
Use that all the time now.
It makes you think about how you think about music. I
You
find
seen that the adaptation is so metacognitive.
No, but
I
like
find this album to
in
be
August's
fantastic.
defense, he actually, because we use that word a lot in psychology, and he did use it correctly in his defense.
I love
Nice.
that.
Yeah, he used it right.
Because
I
it was
was
about
just
like, and he used it to make a point that we would all agree with. It just sounded really dumb the way he used that
Yeah,
word.
yeah, you're right. You're right. God damn it, you're right.
well, it wasn't so much that it sounded dumb, at least from my perspective. It was that was not the word that I expected to come out of his mouth just then.
Yes.
It
Nice.
worked. I was just blown away.
I'm happy then. Anyways, favorite tracks are The Phone Call That Changed My Life, Liar Liar, and I'm gonna throw in The Sunshine State.
I hate you.
My least favorite track is probably Caught in the Act, and I'm gonna give this album an 8 out of 10.
Rated
Nice.
the Farrah Abraham album higher than Run the Jewels.
Logan, it's your turn.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Oh
Um,
boy.
It would feel completely disingenuous to me to say that there are any tracks on here that are what I would call my favorite.
I know.
There is really only Less Bad, and I want to talk about this without sounding like I'm just clowning on it, but I did not enjoy a second of this album. Even though there are some songs that are certainly a lot worse than others, those being Caught in the Act is one, Unplanned Parenthood, as Tyler mentioned, those are both like extra bad. Probably The Sunshine State as well. I don't know. For a score, it's like a light 3 out of 10.
Oh,
I shan't return to it.
That's still
That's
like generous
better than
for
I
a record that
expected.
you don't enjoy any second of in your own words.
Yeah, because I think if nothing else, it's fascinating,
Yeah.
and it captures such a strange terrible moment in someone's life so effectively that I can't like say that it's worthless. And especially after this conversation, I'm certainly unwilling to say that it's worthless, because this is, I mean, as Jake said, we are reverse engineering the way we listen to music here. And that's, the album had to be doing something for that to happen.
Yeah,
But
that's
This
the
is
good
like
point.
how the most popular and most well-written review of A Crow Looked at Me on Sputnik Music is a review that gives it a 1 out of 10, because he said in the comments that he felt like to do anything less would be disrespectful. And it's like, yeah, I get that.
yeah,
You could like not rate it at all. Like people forget that's a
Wait.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they can't on Sputnik though if you're
That's
reviewing
true.
something.
Garbage site.
Saoirse.
Hello. I'm glad this
Favorite track.
conversation happened, but I have very little nice to say about this record in any context. My favorite song is Searching for Closure. I suppose I would include in my top 3 After Prom and the final track. The worst one is Caught in the Act, which sucks ass. It is Selfie by the Chainsmokers. And I'm going to give it a 2.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Just decidedly less negative than I thought.
My top 3 tracks are The Phone Call That Changed My Life, Liar Liar, and Searching for Closure. And I will give this album 7.5.
All right.
What's the average here? I'm so
4.9.
curious.
4.9. That is
Still
better
rated
than-
at higher
Just
than-
on the verge of a 5.0.
Still rated at higher than Freddie Gibbs of The Alchemist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And higher than the 1975.
This certainly
Well,
made
it's-
me think more than that album.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, it's
boy.
definitely more interesting.
Yeah.
And
All right.
we've got a recommendation. Next
Yeah,
week,
exactly. Morgan, you've got a recommendation.
Oh
Yeah!
the recommendation for next week is
Yes, I was going to say we should call this, because I already used it in a tweet, but we should call this like Listening Club, or give this a name or something. Like
Yeah,
Listening
let's call
Club.
it like a record club. What about that?
Yeah, sure.
yeah,
That's
sure.
cute.
All right, so next up on the Record Club, we have the seminal album by progressive metalcore band Between the Buried and Me. That album being Colors, which is their most acclaimed record probably, and one of the most highly lauded metal releases of the century thus far. And it's my recommendation, and I am excited.
This is going to be the biggest review, like recommended album we've had to review so far, like in terms of like scale and acclaim.
Yeah, it's certainly not the fucking Farrah Abraham album, I'll tell you that.
And we will also be reviewing Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers and Deep Down Happy by Sports Team.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So please,
So-
before you tune in next week, make sure you listen to those records, especially the Record Club one, Between the Buried and Me, and we will be diving in depth when we return.
Yes.
also
yes.
listen to Glacier Flower.
Yes, yeah,
Which I will
meant to-
plug again.
Yes.
I meant to mention at the start of the Glacier Flower bit that we're there, if you haven't listened to it, because it's only on YouTube at the moment. August, is there any plans to put it on like Bandcamp or anything, or do?
I
put it
think,
anywhere else?
yeah, I'm gonna try and do that because I have all of the files are already high enough quality that I could do that. So
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to do.
I
I'd
think
love
it'll
to-
probably be up on Bandcamp.
I just know that I'd love to have like it downloaded and like put it on my phone.
Yeah,
So that would
that's
be
why
cool.
that's why I didn't get around to it, because not to make an excuse, but it's
You're making an excuse, so it's fine.
for the love of God, shut up.
Sorry, this is just a bit at this point between you and me.
Yeah,
It's a
it
bit,
is.
So I'm just
It is,
leading
and
into it.
and secretly, I would never admit it outside of this context, but I'm a fan of this bit.
Unlike the stole my
Unlike
clothes.
August.
Yeah, because that was stupid.
That was the greatest idea I've ever had.
I'm convinced it wouldn't have been a bit if I didn't notice.
No, if you didn't notice, I wouldn't have done it.
No, whenever we have stuff that we're discussing in the next week, I always make sure I play something from it just to make sure it's in my recently listened part of Spotify. That's how I just try and keep track of everything, because like looking at Microsoft Excel sheets kind of give me a headache. So I don't check that unless I'm adding to it or seeing an addition to it. So I just typically have stuff in my recently played on Spotify, and that's how I keep that in mind.
Cool. Well, if you listening at home and you haven't heard Glacier Flower 20, there will be a link in the description below. Please go and listen to it. It is very easy to listen to, and it is worth your time.
Yeah, don't be me.
Yes.
Don't be me.
Is this an anti-drug commercial?
Yep. I learned it from watching you, Morgan.
Laziness? Yeah, probably.
That's
Go
been
to end the
episode.
podcast on.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop.
Then Snow Angels by Anamanaguchi plays.
We've destroyed our entire perception of life at this point.